Hello, Barry.
Hello. How are you?
Pretty good, actually. I might
Good.
have even gotten 6 or so hours of sleep last night.
Fabulous. You'll be sharp as a tack today.
And happy birthday
Oh,
by a
thank
few
you.
days.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a inauguration day, and also the same day as inauguration day of my birthday was the day that Nora Bateson and Dave Snowden did their live stream on the Leadership Summit.
I haven't actually viewed it. I viewed the first 2 minutes, but did you see that I created a doc and linked it?
No, I hadn't seen that yet.
If you go to the video, I think the third comment might actually be my doc link.
On the YouTube video, you actually added a comment. That's interesting because I also added a comment, I think this morning it was, and I didn't see yours. So I must have put mine in just before you did yours.
No, I did mine yesterday.
Oh, did you? Well, that's odd. I don't recall seeing it.
If you check it now, see if my link is there.
Yeah.
Or maybe the video is posted twice. I don't know.
I don't think so. The summit website said that video is only going to be available for like a 2-day window. And it is an unlisted YouTube, but the unlisted YouTube, if you know the URL to it, it's still there. And I don't know if it's going to be unlisted, eventually, or but it's.
You mean taken off?
Yeah. See, the thing is that they said it was only going to be available for free viewing for like 2 days, but it's still there but you have to know the URL because it's unlisted. Now they can make it from unlisted to, I don't know, private or whatever, yeah. or change the URL name and not disclose it. So that URL may or may not, continue to work.
Well, let me take a look right now.
Yeah. Let's see. I have it open in one of my tabs here. If I can find too damn many tabs open all the time. Here it is. Let's see. Well, at the moment.
Yeah, it's still there, and mine is the third comment.
Okay, let me refresh it because I see my comment from 2 hours ago, and I see John Mortimer's comment from 2 days ago, and Guy Taylor's comment from 2 days ago, but I don't see yours. So let me refresh.
Go to YouTube. Are you actually viewing it?
I'm on YouTube, and the URL is just give you the last couple of letters of it. Got to zoom in here.
You're looking at a different video because I see Guy Taylor's comment.
The YouTube video code ends in the letters VFO, and that's the only version that I know
of. Let me confirm that. Yes, that is correct. Capital V, capital F, lowercase o.
Right. So I refreshed it. So let me see if
you'll see my comment.
I got to stop the playback. There we go. Let's see. Me, Mortimer. No, I'm still only getting. It says 5 comments. 2 hours ago from me, 2 days ago from John Mortimer, and then 2 days ago from Guy Taylor with replies. Let me check his. No, the 2 replies to him are not. So yours is not showing up for me. It's not showing up for me.
Here, let me show you my screen cap from that.
Yeah, and then I can show you mine if you want, but you probably could take my word for it.
Okay, I am sending it. Actually, how do we send screen caps? Let me do it via.
Just do a share screen.
Facebook Messenger. No, I'm not going to do that to Glenn.
Glenn's on a desktop, isn't he?
Yeah. Hello, guys. I don't think I know the context here, but show whatever you want.
Okay.
Nora Bateson and Dave Snowden were live streamed at a summit for an hour and something interview, and the video is up on YouTube. And I added a comment, and Sam says he added a comment, but I don't see Sam's comment on the YouTube video comments.
All right. Well, hey, Heiner, how are you? If you're okay with it, let me share my screen then for about 5 seconds and show you what's going on.
Okay. Let me just see if it agrees with what I see.
Screen share. Okay, so now let me go to my video. Okay, so
Yep.
Barry, you
that
can
part
see,
looks
this is the
familiar.
video, right? Dave Snowden and Nora Bateson, right?
Yeah.
This is it.
Okay, now scroll down
So
to the
down
comments.
here are the comments. John Mortimer, Guy Taylor, and then Sam Hahn, that's me, okay?
No, that's interesting. You see yours, and where you see yours, I see mine.
Well, let me refresh then. Maybe they deleted it. Maybe they
Well, I
didn't
don't
like
know.
it.
I mean, I see my comment, and
No,
you
it's
see.
still there. Still
Oh,
there.
now you see mine. Go scroll down.
And
Now mine is
now,
there.
And my comment is still there, Barry.
Yeah, but now when I refresh, I don't. Yours doesn't come up. Maybe do I have to? Do I have to get rid of?
Anyway, I'm gonna stop sharing now. And let me let somebody else in. Another Data Butler. Oh, that must be Colin.
Got to stop the playback. So
I really like that story you wrote in the chat, Barry, about the data information. Yeah, that was a really good story. How he just redefined all those terms in that circular way.
Yeah, you see, I wrote that in 2001 in the voice of Montana Mouse, he's one of my alter ego characters. He's my journalist he's like John Watson to Sherlock Holmes. He writes the stories, but he's kind of irreverent, tells the stories in a rather irreverent way.
Yes. Yeah. I almost felt like I was there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have Heiner, we have Colin, we have the three that are visible. And it is 5 minutes after. So I invite optional check-ins if anyone would like to do so. And just as a meta comment, I have 3, possibly 4 possible topics that are new. These are in addition to all the others that I've posed before. You've got 3 and others. By the way, Colin's saying I'm too far from the mic. Can you guys hear me okay?
I hear you fine. You are a little
Yes.
bit distant, but not so bad that I can't easily make out what you're saying.
Okay, let me try something else. Let me try.
I'm hearing you loud and clear.
You are? Okay. All right, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing.
Yeah, that's
Is that
more
any better?
presence. Yeah.
Very
There's a
good.
term in audio called presence, which is how close you sound to the mic or how far you sound from the mic. And you're sounding reasonably present.
Is it acceptable?
Oh, yeah. No problem.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Very good sound.
Thank you very much. Okay. So as a meta comment, I have 3, possibly 4 seed topics, just in case, you guys have a problem coming up with topics to talk about. I don't think I've ever experienced. Anyway, optional check-ins. 3, 2, 1, go.
I'll just say that liminality is in the air. This is an overused word now, but there's a lot of things burbling to the surface that are ready to be talked about.
Did you see my post on liminal yesterday?
Was it in one of the GCC?
I think it was, but
Let me see if I can
anyway, it
find
was
it.
a tongue-in-cheek, somewhat pokey word that says, people love using the word liminal.
Oh yeah, it was a cartoon. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I remember that. Yeah, it becomes a buzzword and it gets overused.
Yes, for people who have master's degrees, was the quote.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that's funny.
Okay. Thank you. There's topic number 1. Barry, actually, expand a little bit more about that. What did you want to say about that one again?
Liminality?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I have to tell you where I learned the word. I learned the
about
word.
the possible topic that we want to talk about. What is the possible topic you want to talk about?
Okay, so well, let me simply give you my definition of it, if that's helpful. So there are things that are below the surface, kind of either below conscious awareness or below the level where you have vocabulary to raise it. And as things kind of burble up to the surface, they get kind of around the surface. You feel that there is something tangible there that needs to be talked about, and you don't yet have the right words, but they're starting to come out. You're talking around it. And so liminality is this point in time where a topic becomes available for public discussion because it's no longer taboo. It's going to be okay. People aren't going to, be disturbed by bringing up the topic, and you're beginning to have the phraseology, the vocabulary to articulate it, and people will know what you're talking about. If you have something that you want to talk about and you don't have the name of it, that's a well-known name, how do you mention something that doesn't have a well-known name? And you use metaphors and talk around it, and people have what are you talking about? I can't figure out what this thing is that you're referring to so elliptically. So liminality is where you're beginning to have a common language to talk about something that everybody has an awareness of, but don't really have the wherewithal to discuss in a common language.
Okay, and the discussion topic you propose is?
Oh, the what specific one?
Maybe an example of something like that.
Or was there a point you wanted to make about liminality? Or its
well, my point was that a number of things are at that stage, more than one. And I think if I wanted to make a comprehensive list where I didn't leave out one, I'd have to stop and think for a minute to make the list. But a lot of them have been discussed at some level in the Zoom sessions, in the messenger chats, the group messenger chats, in GCC, the group chats. They've been coming up a little bit, but not a whole lot of response yet, because I think people haven't quite wrapped their brain around when somebody says, "What are you talking about?" You know, and a couple of times I will bring up something and somebody will say, "What the hell are you talking about?" Meaning that the vocabulary terms I use didn't register. It didn't bring up a picture in their head that matched the picture in my head. So then I go, well, maybe this isn't ready. I think the example,
okay.
Well,
right.
I don't need to give
the topic.
Example.
Good, thank you. I have lots of rejoinders, but I just want to see if we want to collect some other topics. Glenn, any topics,
well,
any check-in?
Well, I'm kind of ready to go wherever. I mean, there was some interesting topics in the chat, and we also, I mean, we were mentioning about the Facebook group moderation. Maybe that could be interesting. I haven't touched too much on that, but I mean, I can go into whatever you want to go into. Really, don't have any strong preferences.
Okay. Can you say that again? I didn't quite get the key word.
Well, it was the GCC Facebook group is. I mean, I think that's an interesting subject. Whether something more could be done with that sort of.
Just how to develop it.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of more active moderation. What would that be? Like, I think me personally, I have a preference for more of a hands-off moderation, but then there can be some exceptions. But then there's also the question of sort of if one wants to be more of an active participant. I'm sort of on the fence there. I mean, sometimes I feel that I want that to be more active and respond and share things. For example, a newsletter. Let's say, we made a little newsletter based on a conversation that could be shared. That could be beneficial for the group. So there's just many questions around that, which we kind of haven't looked into that much so far, I think. And I think there's a lot of possibilities for use for sort of stimulating that the Facebook group to be more of a play a useful role, I guess one could say, in the ecosystem.
Thanks. I got the topic. The Facebook group and moderation and its role. All right. Poland, Heiner, any thoughts? I'll give you 5 seconds. You chime in. I think 5 seconds have passed.
I don't know if you can hear me. I haven't checked what microphone I have yet, but continue
yes,
on. I want to follow up on what we've been the trail we've had, I think you're doing pretty good with that, Sam. We had a discussion last week about whether the topics were too wide ranging and a confusion whether we were actually focusing on a wide range and spreading ourselves thin. So there's different ways of looking at how we approach the topic. So that focusing is still one for me, and not being misinterpreted and trying to be negative towards it, but positive towards what works better. It's hard to find that line of criticism that's accepted. Anyway, so yeah. And I might be able to talk about a few things that I've been playing around with as well a little later on, but just let it flow. And if I don't get my opportunity to talk about that, I think you've all seen more posting from me lately, trying to focus on highlighting, and it's a bit to do with what Glenn's talking about with newsletter, but more about following thought trails as opposed to exactly everything that happened. It's all useful. Everybody's contributions are useful, and you know, that has to do with building upon contributions that Sam has started up as a foundation for us to all share. Like the Google Doc would be a fundamental one right now, but we could maybe see if we couldn't take stock on our focusing tools. But other than that, no, continue on.
Thank you, Colin. Kayla, welcome. Are you on your walk or are you at home?
Just got out of the shower.
Oh, well, we need a video.
What?
Excuse me?
I'm just being inappropriate. Anyway.
Don't worry,
Heiner.
you'll see me.
Oh. Hey, Kayla, any topics that you want to toss on the table today?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Heiner, I know you're there lurking. Any thoughts?
No, I'm just listening. It's not possible otherwise. Talk to you later.
Heiner's multitasking as usual.
How was my microphone? I am using the one I want now. I'm going to put in some presence here, proximity. Does that sound better? Like if I hold it close, too loud?
You sound
Because
like you're close.
I've had some horrific microphone sounds.
Yeah, for some reason your voice sounds different.
It does.
I don't know why.
It sounds a little bit more like this now.
Is that right?
And you
So I've got that problem back
faster.
again. Yeah, no, it's
it's not that severe. It's not that severe, but
Yeah, I
it is picking
exaggerated,
up
but-
more of the highs.
Yeah, I exaggerated.
Oh, I know what you're
so-
talking about. I've come across it, and for some reason it seems to give me a problem with Zoom. I'm going to look at the settings again. The technology is bane of existence.
It's like a little bit of helium in your lungs.
Yeah.
Not a lot of
yeah.
helium, but just a little
A
bit.
little
of helium.
bit.
I
Yeah, a
don't
little
get
bit
that.
of you. Sort of a little lighter.
I switch over to the microphone for the webcam. But yeah, having good quality mics and sounds, and every once in a while everybody has such a problem. So it's
Yeah,
You
no,
sound
that
more
was
good for the
picking up
audio.
less
audience
of
if you
your
have bass.
I can't hear you now, Sam.
That was picking up less of your bass. It's picking up more of the highs and
Yeah, I
less
think
of the lower tones.
that's right. But it's not extreme. It's just like a little
No,
less
we can
bass.
recognize
It's like a kid.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit more like a
Not like
kid.
you're about 12 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd say something going on with the sampling. So now I'm on the microphone for the webcam.
Yeah, see,
Thing.
now the highs are all like clipped off.
Yeah, a little choppy now.
Yeah, it's choppy now. Yeah, so now it's the webcam microphone, which isn't all that great. So
Yeah. More bass, but more
well,
choppy.
this is a really good microphone, but there's a frequency problem. Let me not steal any more time. Continue on, guys.
You may have a filter that's doing bad things to you. Anyway, let me go through some of the topics that I had come up with that were curious to me and see if they're curious to anyone else, okay? I'm surprised people haven't mentioned it yet, but 45 is out and 46 is in. So that might actually have stimulated some thought, maybe some possible optimism, maybe some possible false optimism, we'll see. So that's idea number 0. Idea number 1 is, let me let somebody else in, unless somebody else can do it. Oh, Keith. Keith has been trying about 8 or 9 times to get in today. And I've let him in 7 or 8 times, and somebody else might have done so.
Yeah, me too. And now he's here again.
See, there's Keith again. He's trying again.
He's knocking on the door.
It shows that Thies is already in.
There.
There he is. There's Thies. I think we tried letting you in about a dozen times so far today. So there seems to be a something that needs to be unblocked there. Anyway, let me talk about possible ideas 1, 2, and 3, okay? And idea number 1 continues on this arc of focus, as Colin pointed out again today, which is, I'm curious about the relationship between simplicity, focus, systems thinking, complexity theory, and what helps in all of that soup to allow focus to be achieved. So I do think that there's a notion of simplicity, which sounds like it's in contradiction to complexity. I don't think it is personally myself, but that's how typically it comes about. People talk complexity, then the next word that shows up is simplicity, and it seems like, you know, they may be in conflict. All of which is in the context of systems thinking, but for me, it's in the context of focus. So for me, that would be possible topic number 1. Possible topic number 2 is, and I'll pose it with a pointed question. When is it appropriate to disengage? Because I know that willingly or unwillingly, I have disengaged with some threads of activity or conversation, not necessarily due to lack of interest, but I mentioned it last time as possibly an inability to keep up with all the stuff that's going on. And that may appear to others as though I have disengaged, okay? So I wanted to bring that topic back again. And it could be a person, it could be a thread, it could be a group, it could be a conversation, you know, but those are all things which relate to this idea of staying involved versus disengaging versus reappearing. And then what does that look like? And does that slow others down, etc.? So that's idea number 2. Here's idea number 3. Conversation arcs that avoid ego. And I could just leave that be very, very suggestive, okay? Because I think, you know, some of us have been in these conversations now where we can sort of see contributions come from interest, come from generosity, come from care. Other contributions come from what appears to be ego. And I'm wondering whether or not that's an interesting thing to lean into. That's idea number 3. And then idea number 4, and then I'll stop, is to bring back this notion of truth related to this notion of experience, tossing in the possibility of illusion mixed in with disappointment. So I wanted to say, hey, this soup of truth and experience and illusion and disappointment, and Colin's going to throw these other 2 words in, sure, I'm sure, religion and theism and atheism and science, all in a mishmash. To me, of all of those words, the one that's still the one that I embrace the most strongly is truth, possibly even with a capital T. And so I wanted to bring that back. So those are the 4 ideas, in addition to all the other dozen or so that I mentioned before, that might be fun to talk about. And then I have a meta comment. A meta comment could be that those of us that are interested in certain topics might want to, again, take certain Saturdays and lead and moderate on those specific Saturdays. The reason for that is I think people may have enjoyed it the first time, may have gotten a different experience out of it. But for me, selfishly, it might allow me to step back and do some more encoding, some more mapping, working in the brain, working in workflow, taking notes, you know, going into other tools, working in Trello, working in diagramming, you know. So I'm finding it impossible almost for me to do that during the session, because I have to maintain, you know, enough attention and focus on what is actually being said, so I don't actually encode and write and type in real time. The only way I can really write and type in real time, by the way, It's when I'm not at all participating and I'm only listening and I'm only trying to record. Okay, because the minute I step in, oh, I want to respond on that, then I stop typing, and then that hole needs to be filled later. So those are 4 possible topics and 1 meta comment. Over.
Whoa, that's impressive. A lot of good stuff there. Yeah, well, I can say a few things that come to mind. I mean, it's so much there. Obviously, this last one with truth, illusion, experience, and then you bring in disappointment. That's certainly a topic that I see a lot of interesting things. I think that's certainly something that interests me a great deal. Then there was this with simplicity, complexity. That sounds like a really typical barn racing subject. I think we've kind of gone around that quite a lot, but it's obviously a very big one. But then you also mentioned this with disengagement, and that I really feel that relates to me a lot, because I tend to disengage. And interestingly, it's often the very discussions that interest me the most, where sometimes I don't exactly know what to say, and I just think about it, and then I'm planning to respond, and then I just sort of never get around to responding sometimes. And I've noticed that happen many times with me personally. So obviously that's also a very big, practically relevant topic, because we're always so overwhelmed by so many things that are interesting, and you sort of can't focus on all of them. But then how does that come across? And it's a lot of nuances to all that.
Yeah. So in case anybody wants to respond, please do. Otherwise, for me, disengagement can look like non-support when it doesn't have to be. It could also mean non-interest when it could be exactly the opposite, as you said. So finding a tempo or a rhythm or a cadence in one's participation in something often has nothing to do with what you're engaged in. It has to do with other things in your life, doctor's appointments, pets, weather, disease, all those sort of things, family, So yeah, when we're trying to do a broad range of things, it may be misinterpreted. And I would hope that that is not the case, or at least that this engagement might be at least asked about. Hey, what do you think about this? Or, hey, how come you haven't responded to this in 4 days? Or I'll actually talk about one that's very personal, okay? Barry writes a lot of parodies. I know almost none of the songs that Barry's talking about. So I can't re-sing those songs in my head. I know very few of them. So I don't know where it's being clever. I don't know where that rhythm is trying to match the existing rhythm. So that means of reaching me isn't necessarily the most effective. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying it doesn't land for me the way it may land for other people. Okay. Over.
I'll just point out that whenever I write the lyrics of a song parody, I almost always will provide a link to the original song, a YouTube version of it, or the music to it, so that people who are unfamiliar with the song can quickly find a version of it that will either provide the tune or the YouTube video.
Right. So that, again, either 2x's or 3x's the amount of time that it takes to understand that thing.
I should also say, I said this before, I think this of having different hosts for the meetings is a very good idea for many reasons.
So Glenn, if you were to take a Saturday, maybe even next Saturday, which of these or other topics might you really want us to focus on?
Good question.
Yeah. It's well, obviously this whole issue of truth, in the sense of whether we can collect some truths that all of us believe in very strongly, and maybe certain shared foundations, which pretty much every person has in common, right? That seems to be one of the things that is not so often mentioned in the public discourse, which is part of the problem of the information ecology, that it tends to focus on a lot of what seems to be artificial conflicts, etc. But I'm not. But the other thing, which could be an antidote to that, would be if we could collect things that we all actually agree on, based on common experience. So that's sort of what I would relate with the truth topic. And then I'm very interested in whether one could, from that foundation, begin to build a vision for the future of what's possible. So I guess the larger topic can be viewed as a journey from truth into possibility, and then at some point from possibility into perhaps creative action of some kind. But of course, just the journey itself is a creative action. So I mean, I also resonate a lot with, this is something Collins mentioned a lot, with understanding that sort of that the journey itself of having these meetings can be a tool for understanding. So, you know, Bohemian dialogue, those kind of things, the sort of things Krishnamurti was doing, it's obviously something that interests me a lot, just to, in terms of the format of the discussion, to, in that sense, one could really talk about anything, but it's really a focus on really trying to discover what is real, and to use that occasion to connect with what is real and what is true. Yeah, that is a big topic, and obviously I'll be very interested in going into that.
So Glenn, I'm going to give an anti-example and be kind of a butthole right now. Heiner, if you are still listening, how do you pronounce David Bohm's last name? Is it Bohm or Berm or some other kind of name? So I'm doing this intentionally and I'm being an asshole, but I'll make a point later on. Are you listening?
I understand. It's only that you check if I'm listening. It's David Bohm, B-O-H-M, Bohm.
So there's no umlaut?
No, it's not it's Bohm.
Bohm, okay.
Bohm, yeah,
Right.
I think so.
You see, with all this David Bohm people and his wife Sarah, we had this with Tony Judge, the school of ignorance, to really make this exercises where nobody is expelled and everybody who is going on, then the group follows. And there we discussed his last book, on where David Bohm writes in the last footnote, my last problem with the Bohm dialogue is how to stop the talkers.
Yeah.
And this
I watched your video on that, by the way, Heiner.
And I'm just giving you this idea because there was Tony Blake. Tony Blake was a Gurdjieff pupil, and he did the books on the intelligent enneagrams, how to go from positions and phases to other valences or identities. I never have the right words, but this was only to tell you I'm with you, but not fully.
Okay. So let me explain why I was kind of an asshole right now. Okay. That was clearly a distraction from what Glenn was saying. And I'm sorry I did that. Okay. But that's what happens a lot. You know, it happens in these conversations that we get these little thoughts that take us into these little tributaries, and then we lose the focus of what Glenn was saying earlier. So I'm kind of indicating, if you were moderator and I just did that, what would you do?
I think I would probably just let it happen and then try to bring back the focus again. So it's sort of like to stick to a thread, and then sometimes you go off, and that's okay. But then can you just come back? And maybe if you do it right away, it can be a larger connection between the things that go off on the sides. That
Right.
it might become meaningful after a while. So I guess the answer would be to be a little patient, but also to try to actually have some focus myself and bring it back.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Thank you, Glenn. In fact, I try to do that. I try to have a little balance between allowing the digression to take place versus understanding whether or not it is important to keep the focus at hand, right? And that's always going to be subjective, independent, internal judgment inside each of us, right? We can't have that conversation in the large as the conversation is happening, right? It's not really possible. So that's why, this whole role of moderation is so important. And usually if I can't do it within minutes or so, I at least try to do it at the end of the conversation in a checkout. But by then it might have been too late, because by then people might have said, oh, we didn't actually have focus today, or we went all over the place, or I came to talk about X, but it turned out to be about all these other things, right? So that is a phenomenon that happens, and I hear those comments quite a bit. So unless we clamp down on these digressions and attain focus, we're going to hear these criticisms. But by quote unquote using this negative word, clamping down and keeping focus, there's a number of other negative connotations that get raised. So I'm just trying to help us figure out, how do we want this experience to work? And if one of us has one notion and somebody else has another notion, then at times both those people are going to be disappointed. And I guess one of the underlying themes that I'm trying to get to is minimize disappointment. I'd like a group minimal disappointment. Okay. Maybe that's not a good thing. I haven't really leaned into that a whole lot, but that at least is something that I think I might be interested in achieving, right? So whether or not it's that one person has to be, the brunt of all the disappointment and all the other, n-1 people are happy, that's another, problem, or that's another good thing. You can look at it as good or bad. Or everybody is halfway disappointed and everybody is halfway happy. That's another view of this, then nobody's really truly happy, but then nobody is truly unhappy. Anyway, so I'm just kind of curious about all those, and I bring those up because those comments have been levied at these conversations. So that's why I think they're relevant. Over.
I'll bring you one little specific idea that I think could be a good idea. And that is, what if we had a sign for a brief clarifying question? Because sometimes we have this, but that could mean all kinds of stuff. But yes, yeah, for example, yeah. But that could be a very useful way to stop the talkers, or at least refocus it. And that's the kind of interruptions we want. I think we talked about interruptions before, the difference between the kind of things that sort of block you, and the kind of things that want to interject to gain more clarity, etc. So I think that might be a very useful thing. This or...
I was thinking about Q-like symbol with the O with a tail, but then it might be a little bit too suggestive in other contexts.
Yeah, exactly. that was what I was, yeah. But I think that's important. If we had a sign for just a brief question, sort of like a clarifying question, if we could do that more, then might be useful for those purposes.
So I think Glenn and I have been monopolizing the conversation. So I'd like to see if other people really want to speak.
Well, everything I would have said is in the chat now. And the freedom of writing is, the antidote to that is the freedom to not read.
But it's also the freedom to do it no matter who's speaking.
Yes, there you don't have the interruption. You might get parallel conversations interleaved like braided, and braiding you can sort of get past braiding, but you can't get past talking over somebody because nobody can hear anything.
And hence, that's why I like taking notes and outlines.
Yeah.
You know, because then you can say, oh, on this node, let me add something and not disrupt what's going on other nodes. I love outlines for that reason.
Yeah.
By the way, there are other shared group editors out there where you can actually all collaborate on a document and anybody can type anywhere at any time. Google Docs obviously is one form of that.
Right.
I think meeting words, I think might be another one. It's even simpler, okay? No fancy formatting, but everybody's text comes up in a different color, you know? That might actually be a very useful visual indicator. Okay, so I just wanted to proceed the conversation. Oh, there's Heiner. Heiner, you are there. You can't see your eyes, by the way.
Yes, I have a problem with the background in Zoom. It's probably a bug. No problem. Take me as I am.
I'm trying to, but you don't look like you are.
I cannot do without background at the moment. It doesn't work. No, you see, you know the principle in open space, voting with your feet. When there is a group you don't like to, you go to somewhere else. And this is what's not possible here in Zoom. That's why we have this spreadsheet to show where the interest is. And the interest can always be moved. You give it to Sam, and then Sam gives it to Barry. This is all of this process we did in the BOEM dialogues, what I call token, giving voices. I want to listen to you. This process through signals, and we had the signals thing along with Fleming and Tammy. How can we use more signals and symbols in conversation to see, please continue, please go into the deep, don't ramble on. You are always saying the same stuff, better shut up. There we have to come to a broader bandwidth of communication signals. Otherwise, a single moderator alone is lost. And as Dave said in this discussion with Nora, if you listen to the video, they had 3 moderators. And they were in turn to really avoid this one monopolizing the group. Anyway, I was rambling on, but it's very interesting what you're saying here, even when I cannot be with you.
I'm curious. I did view Heiner's 10-minute video or so about, I forget what he called it. It was something from what, 8 or 9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, about talking tokens and, you know, focus and granting others time and attention and focus. Anybody else watch that?
I had 2 of Heiner's videos. One, which I haven't watched yet, is the interview with Lubna, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Duda.
This one was not an interview, the one that I'm referring to.
Yeah, the other one, I don't think I still have the video showing. So that was the one that was on Vimeo. I guess they're all on Vimeo.
Yes, it was on Vimeo.
I don't know that I have that one.
It started out with a mention on Magic Roundtables, but, you know, talked about talking sticks or talking tokens.
I was watching those sessions from last year and they were talking about focus. Even Colin was talking about focus.
Yeah, we've been trying to attain focus for quite a while. Yes.
Yeah, there were 3 videos from early 2019, I think February and maybe April, and they all involved Heiner and me, and one was with Stacy. One was, I guess, Doug's session where people introduced the other person. Instead of introducing themselves, they introduced one of the other people. That was kind of interesting. So yeah, there were.
Okay. All right. So
That's, yeah.
I'm still curious about where we want to go today. We've been wandering around meeting formats and focus. Or at least that's how I take it. Okay. So let me ask as part of that question. Alex, you're there, you with a finger up, you wanted to ask something
Wait.
first?
I wanted to add a word to the word focus. It's on, no, 2 words, sorry. 2 words, on agreements, focusing on agreements.
Okay, I think we're going to hit that topic as part of this conversation, but let me ask my question and see if we want to tie it together. I have made a practice of, at least in the sessions that I moderate, setting up this Google Doc where we collect who attended, when it was, link to the whatever, the actual notes, the transcript, all this sort of thing. And it's world writable. Anybody can add anything to it at any time, and I make no restrictions. Hopefully people don't abuse that, and I've never seen it abused yet. Sooner or later it's going to happen. However, Google does a pretty decent job of keeping revisions of documents. So I believe in most cases that damage, if it ever happens, could probably be addressed okay. But anyway, I'm curious about this method because I started in some sessions that I do not attend. I started to create this also. I did this for a tech talk on, I believe it might have been Closure, and I offered it up to the community. I did it to this Dave Snowden, Nora Bateson talk that Keith sent me. Barry, you referred to it as well. By the way, Tease, Barry says that's only going to be available for 2 days. So maybe that document is not going to be very, well, actually, no. That document could then actually be more useful if the video is not there, but the transcript is actually there. No?
I recorded the video using, OBS. So I will have a personal copy, which I don't know what legally I could share privately, but I did save a copy on my hard drive.
Yeah. By the way, just for the record, I didn't check the video license before I took the transcript and put it in that doc. Maybe I should, but I don't.
It was public, but yeah, I guess there is a license thing on YouTube where you can give it one or two.
Every time you post a video, YouTube asks what license do you want to apply to this particular item.
Do you know what those mean? Because I read the names of the licenses and I wasn't sure if I understood what they.
Yes. There's a lot of meaning to them. Their Apache licenses are different from MIT, are different from Eclipse, are different from GPL, are different from GNU, are different from general business licenses, and there are hundreds of versions. But they usually come in: are you bound to reshare, or are you bound to certain limitations, or can you make money off of it? Or if you make money off of it, do you have to do these kind of attributions and share? Those are all the different dimensions that those licenses cover. And I, for the record, didn't check that before I did this document. So if next week I'm hauled off to jail and I'm not on this session, you'll know why. Okay. All right. So anyway, I was curious about that habit of creating this document to make other sessions that don't participate in useful. Or is it the case that these videos are just watched and they're not really focuses for engagement? I'm trying to use the document as a place for engagement. So what you think, what you got out of it can be shared with others. What others got out of it can be shared with me, if we value that sort of thing. Now, even just going in and doing speaker identification on that transcript is a useful thing. By the way, having that transcript makes it searchable. You can go into Google Drive and say, open up that document and just search only within that document, or even more usefully, go to the enclosing folder and say, give me all the transcripts that have to do with this word liminal or whatever word you're interested in, okay? And you can find 6 sessions, mention the word liminal. Boom, there you go. There's the time tag. So you click on the video and go to that time tag. Now you're actually re-experiencing that whole event. How much could you actually learn by doing that versus somebody's interpreted notes, maybe from days later? So I'm curious about this model. Obviously, this is an imperfect model, but it's just the one that I'm trying at the moment, okay? Of inviting engagement around events that happened that I may not have been party to. So like that Dave Snowden, Nora Bateson one. I created that thing and I haven't even watched it yet. But I've got the transcript there. So even if the video goes away, at least I can review the transcript later. Problem is, it's not speaker identified, so I don't know which person said what. I could infer, okay, but I wouldn't actually, do it with absolute certainty. Anyway, that's a question I put on the table. Over.
Can that be done automatically soon, do you think?
Otter tries to do that. Otter.ai, as Josh knows, tries to do speaker identification. In my experience, I've had to spend a lot of time doing corrections on that speaker identification. It does, let's say, maybe a 70 or 80% job. That still leaves a lot that needs to be corrected. But yes, it tries to do that.
Humans make mistakes. Apparently, these machines are pretty accurate. And so, yeah, if we have a system that's going to block mistakes, it's going to start blocking humans.
Well, I would say they are, because we're using pretty crappy software systems for the most part. I don't know. That's another topic in itself. But
well, they're the best we got. Technology is going to improve, quote unquote, but it's where it is today.
YouTube has gotten to the point where they're better than my ability to convert phonemes into syllables into words. On the other hand, with those transcriptions, I can go through and recognize a mistranscription and correct it.
Exactly.
And so I've spent a fair amount of time correcting transcriptions on selected GCC Zoom videos. But to do all of them would be ridiculous. You couldn't possibly do more than selected examples.
Right.
Time consuming.
You bet.
No.
But I was just wondering about this suggestion you had, Sam, about how this could be sort of into a flow that makes sense. Like for example, one thing that I have experienced is occasionally after we've had a very interesting meeting, I've sat down and written down my thoughts immediately afterwards. And it seems that that's a very good time to do that, because it's sort of fresh in your mind, but you can also put it together without getting stuck in the details, and you can sort of see the bigger picture a lot easier if you just write something immediately after the conversation is finished. So let's imagine that several of us did this, and then we could share that in a Google Doc. And if we could do that, and let's imagine also that there's a certain thread, let's say there's a theme that we explore over several conversations, which is a big theme that interests us a lot. For example, truth, co-visioning, profiles, some of the big themes that have come up. That I think that could be an engine for collective intelligence. I think if we did that.
Peace. Love that, Tease. Thanks, Glenn. Sorry I interrupted you, but
I'm playing, so.
Oh yeah, that's Thies. Yeah, that. Yeah, that's right.
For those of you that don't recognize it, it's one of Doug Engelbart's signature diagrams, the bootstrapping model.
Yeah.
How we improve our collective capability and our collective intelligence.
We can do that with our ability to combine ideas that are good. There's several ideas at the top of the list. and they're the good ideas. So combining them into a better idea is improving on an improvement. That Doug Engelbart would be singing carols in his grave if we did that, if we accomplished that feat together, united as a group, as this micro agreement.
And it would be very engaging, you know, even if you don't know where it leads, but it would be something that would kind of keep the engagement going and
So
help focus.
Sorry to digress a little bit. Okay, I asked Glenn that if he wanted a particular upcoming Saturday, what he would do. I'm curious if others of you would like to take an upcoming Saturday and focus. For the record, I think Peace, I don't think you've actually had a Saturday. Josh, I'm not sure you've had a Saturday yet either. Michaela, you had one on Talanoa. It'd be good to do. Oh, you probably also had another one that you did with Stacy. So at least two you led in the past. Barry, I don't think you've had an opportunity to do so yet either, since you're relatively new and came really more regularly after we had that round of, yeah, you know, each person taking a Saturday.
Yeah, Kayla can probably tell you how well I did. I did a 20-minute high-speed summary of my research over the last 35 years. And Kayla was present, and my recollection is she gave me a thumbs up that she got a lot out of it, but it was really compressed. It's really a semester's worth of academic material that I gave a teaser to in about 20 minutes.
So my question is though, since this is an invitation to a conversation, that to me sounds more like a lecture or a class.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether or not you'd like to take an opportunity to moderate a conversation versus delivering a class. Udemy, Coursera, you know, others might be better mechanisms or platforms for classes.
Let me just respond to that by telling you that one of the times that I gave my talk in a professional conference of the same material, the conference was held in Boston at a big downtown hotel, and the conference was called Frontiers in Education, and it was mostly attended by people in the education community, teachers, for example. And I was very lucky because the person who was going to come after me didn't show up. So I could go for 40 minutes instead of 20 minutes. And I didn't just present the talk in lecture mode. I used the Socratic method. So instead of giving the content of a slide, I would ask a question of the audience and sort of wait for somebody to respond. And I did the whole talk that way. And the audience supplied every single point of my slides. And at the end of the talk, one teacher who was sitting in the back of the room came up and said to me, "That was the best talk in this conference I've ever attended." And I said, "You mean in this session?" She says, "No, no." I said, "You mean in this year?" She says, "No." She says, "I've been coming to these for a decade. And that was the best talk ever in a decade of attending Frontiers in Education." But one teacher said that to me.
Does the name George Polya mean something to you, Barry?
Yeah, he was the How to Solve It at Stanford. Was that his book?
Yeah, he's also into teaching methods as well. Yeah. And I got that book, I think when I was like 11 or 12 from my dad. And I think I still have that copy, by the way.
Yeah.
So it always surprises me. I'm sorry if this comes across wrong, and I hope it doesn't, but it does always surprise me when that method doesn't seem to be as ubiquitous as it ought to be. You know, that people just pour information into brains as opposed to leading people to think for themselves or to actually come to conclusions or to ask the very next curious question themselves. You know?
It works if I can stand in front of the blackboard, and as people respond to a Socratic question, I will jot down, as I am doing here in the chat, I will jot down just a few words that capsulize it. And at the end of that process, I have got essentially the slides that I was going to give if I had given, you know, a videotape lecture. That's how I do guest lectures. And most of the time it works. But typically 2 people out of a class of 20 will say, "I got a lot out of that." And the other ones are just along for the ride.
I think 2 is a good hit.
It is. 2 out of 20 is a damn good hit. You're lucky to get 1 out of 20.
You know, I found that I hear something brilliant in a webinar or at a meeting, and it doesn't come to me a couple of days later. It'll dawn on me like subliminal messages. It always seems to be apparent at the moment when they say it. It strikes you as something significant then, and that stays in your mind. I don't think anything else comes later.
Yeah.
It might happen for some, perhaps. Over the years and over the decades, something develops, I think, subliminally. And then you go, one day you go, bingo, eureka.
Yeah.
I've got an idea.
Yeah, like Dave Snowden introduced a word, I think it was in one of the question and answers. He introduced the word aporia, A-P-O-R-E-A, and he expected almost nobody would know this word, so he gave the definition. And it's a word that encapsulates a phenomenon that's very common in conversations, where people will throw in a kind of a jumble of things that sound distracting. And in real time, they are distracting. But this concept of aporia, which sort of confuses you and makes you stop thinking the way you are thinking and make you wonder if you're thinking about it in a too narrow or incorrect manner. And that's a kind of a thing where it doesn't hit you until later that it's a little Trojan horse. They dropped a little Trojan horse in there and you attended to it, but you said, what the devil was that? And then after a while you figure out, oh, it's a different perspective. It's a different way of thinking about the same thing that I never thought of. But it drops a little Trojan horse. It disrupts your normal thinking.
Isn't that how people expect mystics to speak?
I think that's one of the things that people like mystics do. They will introduce a term of art that you can remember the term of art because it's an unusual turn of phrase, but you don't quite know what to make of it. But it sort of sticks with you like, that's the name of something that, I need to remember that name because it's the name of something I haven't thought about. And then you go back and you look up the definition and you say, oh, secular, or some other word that sort of makes you rethink your perspective on something.
I'd love to hear other terms that describe secular more deeply, because secular is an interesting word.
Well, I'll give you a good example. Take an everyday word like enthusiasm. Perfectly ordinary dictionary word. People use it in a perfectly secular manner. I was enthused about this new idea, but look at the etymology. The first part, en, plus theos. Theos is the Greek word for the divinity, suffused with divine inspiration. It's literally a word from theology. Suffused with the divine spirit, literally, suffused with the divine spirit. But we say enthusiasm, we don't think, oh, this is a word from theology. There's lots of words in English that if you take them apart, they go back to theology.
You know that enthusiasm has got the 2 parts. So looking at them separately makes a lot of sense. Over.
Let's go with lots of hands. Heiner, Thies, and then myself.
Yes, it all goes. It all goes back to the Greece, and this language is very helpful. But what I wanted to point out is aporia. Dave Snowden with Nora mentioned it, and for me it has something like this surprise involved. We looked here with the Japanese institutes into koans, how through visualization or in other cultures through music, you point out or you make something which is odd, which is not fitting there, but which is catching the interest and making people who are in the field immediately recognize that. And that shows you what you can perceive and what you can perceive unconsciously or subliminal that you're not aware of, But this really makes you go off the track and get surprise answers. So these issues of finding something like in a library, you go to the shelf and just take the right book. It's actually what our brain, our spiritual and mind potentials are. And I think these are associative things which cannot be done by a computer.
Interesting, but I'll wait. Thies is next.
Yeah, nice background, Heiner. No further remarks.
Okay, Colin?
Yes, hello. Did I get my audio solved?
Yes, it sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good.
Did a
now.
firmware upgrade and had to use a battery. Don't even want to get into it because
Beautiful
there's
sound.
so many different layers to a problem. If you can even recognize what a problem is. So I think identifying the problem is first. And here I've identified a problem for me being understood. And it has to do with how much effort I put into being understood and how much I'm listening to the environment I'm in, trying to be understood. So those are the pieces. And I've been doing experimenting, thinking about ways that, if important and worth investing the time, which is the first assessment, or you're capable of tackling the problem, which is another issue. Maybe, you might want to get somebody else to help you with that problem. But anyway, you get the right people together and identify the problem. And then, and then you can go about adding some knowledge and context to that. And that's where I see here a lot of, what was that word, Barry, of words that happen.
Enthusiastic.
You mean
What's that?
APOREA, aporia, that word?
Yeah, I think so. That you were saying David Snowden was mentioning.
Right, he defined it.
I find that, and a lot of things come in piecemeal, but what I've recognized, if something's important to me, then I might put my time into it. Now, I guess that's kind of selfish filter that I have to feel important before I put my time to something. So part of it is double checking whether it's important or not. So I might have a first inkling something's not important and be rudely awakened to how important it is. And then again, I'm probably not the right guy to try to be solving or being on the front line of trying to mitigate or figure out what to do. So that's the first thing, the environment that you're in and how you collect together the sense making to put the time and attention and context, building a premise. And as Sam asked Glenn, how do you fend off a moving premise? And Glenn says, well, I tried to just let serendipity happen because it could be valuable. And that's kind of the deal here. We let serendipity happen to a certain degree. And then later, he would try to refocus to the premise. I find that I don't, like Sam says, he can't map. And I find that a data butler role.
I've never said that.
Well, no, sorry. Sam says he can't map while he's moderating at the same time. Sorry. That's very good to put in there. So I see a team, a data butler, a host, maybe a co-host as a minimum to do a really good focusing in a group. And that's even when they have usually in professional circles, they have the agenda already set. And, if you ever asked a long talker how they feel being on network television, it's like they probably never even started to say something and then they're cut off. So there is a skill to boiling down your message. So that's one of the things I want to do, is learn how to boil down my message. And another thing is how to present it so that it's interesting to other people. And hopefully I've done some homework and tried to align that message so that it can be generatively built upon. So that's kind of what it comes down to. And I've offered some simple crayon drawings of flow charts of ideas of how you could consciously sense make. I feel my experience in this group. So those are in maps. But I also find that if I went back to the time in the video where I wanted to make my point, where because of all of the different flows happening during a conversation like this, it's hard to actually get your point in unless you're already aligned. So to put in a new point in a conversation like this is not so good. So this is kind of why I mentioned at the first, I've been thinking about this and working on ways. So what I want to do is find the important things that we're talking about here, take out the little clips and juxtapose them with the people who are trying to have that conversation and see if it can be nudged along. It's one beyond just putting a timestamp in a video and saying, I'd like to talk about this. It's like, okay, it's like doing what Barry says. When he does a parody, he also shows the material. And I think that's very cool because Barry's putting a lot of time into that and he doesn't want people to misunderstand if they want to put the time into exploring that type of presentation. Granted, I've heard from Barry that presentation is for his own. A lot of it, the parodies that he writes are for his own thing. And it's comical. Josh loves them, so it's a hit and miss with different people. And that's the point. If you want to make a point with Sam, probably don't make a parody in language he doesn't understand, unless he's willing to invest the time into it, which I think he made a point and I'm making a point. How do we filter channels so that we can use our limited time to highlight and feedback to each other what we want to do, as opposed to unnecessarily creating conflict trying to understand, but creating opportunities for people to clarify important things that you might have misunderstood. So it's opposed to, and I'm afraid, as Sam said, there's some topics you come to that are, they're kind of a stalemate. So, and one of them is dogmatic rule systems. And that's something that I have a really hard time aligning with. And I've learned to stay away from it unless it's important. So politics and religion, stay away from them unless it's important. And I think in a global governance group, it's going to come up a lot if we are being inclusive of everybody, as Doug would say. Now, who we pair off with and align with is not everybody. So let's be kind about how we can be compatible with each other as well and realize that. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to grow and learn who each person is. As Barry said, I think as well, he was talking with people from the well years and years ago, like Doug, and people he didn't even know. And here we are back again. So there's obviously, in my mind, a great leaning in towards better. So if we can find that coexistent balance where our claims are balanced with our confidence. And I'm just going to have to learn how to deal with arrogant people and not be arrogant myself, because that's where when somebody says they're 100% sure they know this is true when it's not really true, it's hard to deal with those people. So when that's the disengagement point. How do I calmly disengage from this alignment with this person because it's not aligned and they may think it's aligned? I love it when religious people tell atheists they have a lot of faith, they just don't know it. It's like, faith in what? So some of these conversations are worthwhile and some are not. And I must say that a few people I've talked about religion here and it went well, and a few people I've talked about religion here and it has not gone well. So it has to do more with people, I think, and how dogmatically they are attached to their ideas when it comes to these weird things. So we got the personal side of what's better, and we got, which computer should we buy side of what's better. It's a lot easier to spec out a computer than it is the people involved in a conversation. So you kind of got to be working both sides. And that's a beautiful thing, I think, about GCC, is it does concentrate on people first, I think, which is good. And then the engineers can bite into the problem. Anyway, I won't go on any longer than that. Glad I got my microphone fixed. And some of the things I'm doing is making videos that juxtapose people to try to keep the conversation going if it's interesting. So suggestions for interesting conversations, and more on that later as it unfolds. So thank you for listening.
Okay, thanks, Colin. I believe I was next, unless anyone likes to speak. I wanted to ask a question of you, Barry, because I've got about 3 or 4 points. But one is it a surprise that words we use today may have roots in religious terms?
Is it a, what was the next
religion?
word?
Wait, let me finish the question, okay?
I missed a
Since
word.
religion was early science. In other words, the way people explain the universe is through gods that, have these powers. And is it surprising that those early stems and roots of words might persist and yet transform modern words that we currently use today? And must we then therefore acknowledge the theism in those words, or can we interpret them as historical evolution? So that's a very long question with a lot of parts to it. I'm basically suggesting that it may be okay to look at the derivation of words without necessarily being sucked into the religiosity of it. That's my suggestion here. So that's question number 1. And if you'd like to answer now, go ahead, because I do have other questions as well.
Okay, I won't be able to memorize more than one question. I don't have that much audio tape recorder up here. One of my favorite thinkers and writers is Umberto Eco. And he's probably best known for his novels, like The Name of the Rose is probably his best known novel. It was made into a movie with Sean Connery.
Foucault's Pendulum.
Sorry?
Foucault's Pendulum.
Yes, that was his other one, which is more academic and probably less well known. So his discipline, his academic discipline is semiotics, which is the origin of signs and symbols. And etymologies, for example, is a common example of semiotics. There's a quote of his, one of his books on the book jacket, and I think it was in Italian, is the quote that I like to use a lot. So here's the English translation. Whereof we cannot express a theory, we must narrate a story instead. And most people, I would say 95% of the population, will sit down for a well-told story, and maybe 5% will sit down for a well-crafted theory. And most of the time in the development of our deep understanding, the narrative stories come first, and they start with anecdotes, and then they get kind of polished into a generic synthetic story, which is modeled after maybe 1 or 2 specific cases, but you throw away the identity of the original people and the time frame and the setting, and you make a generic story which has deep meaning. And so the classic stories in Greek literature, the classic stories in Western literature, these stories are meaningful to us because 95% of the population can sit down and absorb a well-crafted story. Now, most stories that people attend to are populated by characters, and a character is a simplified model of a person. Aesop's fables, he uses animals, but most of the time you have a heroic character or an anti-hero. And so if you want to get across a deep idea, you create a superhero character. The superhero comics are, in the 20th century, or Wonder Woman and Superman, and you know all the names of these superheroes, and they manifest some character trait which is in some sense heroic or divine. You don't have to do that. You can introduce these abstract ideas in a purely abstract manner. But if you do that, you'll lose 95% of your audience. So if you look at religions, the Western religions, Judaism and Christianity and Islam, they're populated by characters who are either divine characters or modeled after mortals. And that's the only way that you can get 95% of the population to attend. You can do the same thing in a perfectly academic, abstract, secular manner. And when they do that, they will often borrow the terminology, the vocabulary from these theological stories or these classical stories. Like in psychology, they use all these terms from Greek mythology, you know, Oedipus complex and, you know, this whole class of Jungian archetypal stories. So yeah, we inherit these words, and we lose the theological interpretation, the etymology of them. So you get a word like enthusiasm, and nobody says, "Oh, you know, that means suffused with the divine spirit." It happens to be true, you know. Inspiration, you know, the word spirit, spira, is in inspiration. Spira literally means breath. You know, inhale, exhale. So one of the things that I will do in my little puzzle activity at the Science Museum is I'll give somebody a puzzle, just a manipulable puzzle. You pick it up and you play with it, and it's perplexing because you don't know how to solve it, but you know what the goal is. You want to manipulate the puzzle into a solved state, and people will puzzle and be perplexed and frustrated and whatever, and then they'll have the aha where they see the trick. When they see the trick, they say aha. And that is the moment of inspiration. And when they say aha, they fill their lungs. So it's an inhalation of inspiration. And when you inhale oxygenated air, the color of your face reddens because you're bringing in oxygen, and you get excited. Your heart starts pumping a little bit faster, and you light up. Inhalation of inspiration. And halate is the root of halo, which is how the medieval artists used to draw a picture of somebody in an inspired state. They would draw literally a halo around their head, and that's because they're enlightened and they're brightened. The opposite of an inhalation of inspiration is an exhalation of exasperation. And you go pallid. You know, you don't bring in the oxygen, you don't bring in the iron-rich oxygen, and your skin goes pallid, and you're aghast. Now, you can do the biology and the psychology, but you look at the words. Inhalation of inspiration, spira, breath, exhalation of exasperation, halate, in and out. Whether you want to take this as a perfectly secular academic, biological neuroscience model, that's fine. But you can also present it, especially to children, in the storycraft mode. And so you have characters, synthetic characters, which are enacting these abstractions. Now, I find it useful to have do it both ways. Maybe you start with the classical stories with characters representing these behaviors. And then after you've done the story, you do the theory. Where if we cannot express a theory, we narrate a story instead. Nora says, and Dave Snowden say, do both. You need both. And don't pretend that the words, the dictionary words today don't have their roots in theology. In systems science, we make theories which make predictions. Well, there were people who used to make predictions in the past. They were called seers and prophets. If I want to say what's the origin of systems thinking or scientific thinking, models and predictions, you can just go back to the stories, for example, the Old Testament, where you had seers and prophets. They're doing the same thing. They're doing the same processing, except they didn't disclose the models because the models were abstract, and they didn't have the mathematical language to write them down anyway. Can you imagine taking a modern scientific theory, which is mainly written in the language of mathematics, and try to figure out how to put that into a story that was written and told 2,000-3,000 years ago? It would be written in Urdu. Nobody would understand it. And it's still true today. I mean, you can write down E equals MC square, iconic, and you ask people, what does it say? What does it really mean? What does the letter E stand for? What does the letter M stand for? What does the letter C stand for? What do these things really mean? I'll stop. I can see Sam putting up his hand.
I'm really curious, how many people got all of that?
I followed it. I think this was very interesting. What I sort of heard you alluded to was that, in a way, all the concepts we use, you say they relate to theology. We could also say the foundational meaning of the words always relate to a larger context, that larger context to a yet larger one, which ultimately is the context of the all and everything of which we are part, which is by some called God, by some called the Tao, by some called existence, reality, the universe, etc. But from that point of view, I think this is seems to me like an important observation, that every single one of our more specific ideas, if we really try to define their actual meaning, they're always defined in relation to something around it, which is defined to something around it, etc. So in that sense, the connection between the everyday small things and the truly theological questions, if you want, it seems to be inevitable. Also, another prediction, by the way, I'll try to make a prediction here. See this cup? I'm going to predict that this is going to be above my head in a couple of seconds. See, it happened. I can predict the future. So that's also a point, sometimes you can predict the future by inventing it. Or so I think it's sort of, there's so many layers to this, right? On the one hand, the description is never the described. That's the typical criticism that's given towards the intellectuals. I think it's very valid criticism. Intellectuals tend to get wrapped into models, and then they get so enthusiastic about those models that they begin to almost view them as representative of something larger, and very often sort of mix the map and the territory.
You have an example of that, Glenn? Just quick.
It's like everywhere. I mean, it's one of those things when you start to, whenever people say something that they think is meaningful, let's say you ask them what they mean. The more you inquire, you soon come upon some really big questions. And, okay, one example is categories we give to people. We say that is that kind of a person. It's a sort of reducing something that's dynamic, and practically speaking, it's unlimited or undefinable, and you try to collapse it into a frame. And so this is something intellectuals do all day, and it creates problems. It also creates opportunities, but it's one of those things. If you do it too much, it becomes a kind of madness. But if you can do it now and then, it can be useful. Sometimes it's useful to limit things, but then you have to expand. And that again brings into this issue of breath. It's the inhalation, the exhalation. This is so that's a big theme in itself. The coming in and the returning, the sending out. It's like these two directions which are kind of always meeting, and that in itself seems to be one of the very universal theme that you can also recognize on all kinds of scales. Since just before I finish, I also wanted to mention one thing, since this is all over the place anyway. But it's like, imagine that you have a system which is a social system for becoming more conscious, more aware, becoming more intelligent, let's say becoming better people, where you have to deal with all the complexities of oneself, and then around that system, you need some kind of a group identity because it's practical for people to help one another. And then around that group identity, you need a name or many names, and you may need stories, and you may need theories, etc. So perhaps what we call religions, but also many other kinds of groups, can be these systems that have this outer layer of stories, of metaphors, etc., which are sort of can attract some interest. But then the more you come in, you might eventually come to a point where there's no words at all, and it's just some kind of a purely direct work in trying to see reality directly in oneself. And that's, of course, when you notice that all these words can be a problem if you try to bring them in there. Yeah, I think I'll end it there. I wonder, did any of you catch any of that? I thought that was also a little all over the place.
I'm waiting for the next.
I'm going to respond.
Before you do, Sam, I just want to point out one thing. The word religion has an etymology. It means linking back, literally linking back in time. That's all it originally meant, linking back in time. Go ahead,
That
Sam.
sounds safe enough. That sounds safe.
Okay. I'll go link a couple of these items, and then Heiner, you go, okay? But I'm kind of trying to remember what it is I said. I had asked Barry whether it was okay to think about modern terms in their evolution, not necessarily in their root. So I did get an example, and I have to unpack that. And then Glenn had a bunch there, so I'm gonna have to unpack that as well. But if I was to abstractify a little bit, my question here is there a skill here that we might want to understand about how well we communicate? And by communicate, I mean take a meme or an idea, something that I have in my mind, okay, and try and find its way into your mind and have it be meaningful in some way. That's what I would consider communication, okay? If I spew forth a bunch of frequencies and it makes no difference in your mind, no communication has ever taken place, in my opinion. Likewise, if I say something and your life is unchanged in all ways, in other words, what I said makes no difference to the way you live your life, okay? Then again, in my view, it has not had any meaning to you, okay? So if one really wants to communicate, and if one really wants to, have this be understood, and by understood, I mean internalized in such a way that it actually has meaning, okay? Then it's a very, very, in my view, highly skilled act in order to really figure out what's the best way to get this idea transformed in such a way that it hooks onto something that you've already got in your mind that has meaning. So if I were to talk about quantum physics to a 5-year-old, I would use different words and different quote unquote mental models, okay? And probably, a much shorter presentation than I might to a graduate student, okay? Or to someone who's, a Nobel laureate, or to an artist, right? And it's dependent on my limitations of my understanding as well. Hence this idea that, I've been trying to get launched about this idea called mentor. In other words, there's knowledge, but there's also knowledge about how to present that knowledge so that it's meaningful. And that to me is more interesting than the knowledge itself. And that's why communication and collaboration often doesn't happen. I mean, knowledge itself is going to evolve. We know it's going to evolve, okay? But knowledge about how we present information, that's, to me, an underappreciated domain. And that's the one that I'd really like to lean into. And then the last point about people who have mental models as a comment on intellectualist, my claim is everybody has mental models, okay? Some are better than others. Some have a mental model, and I use this example often of, well, you know, geez, last night there was a ring around the moon, so therefore it's going to rain in the morning, okay? And other people have models around, you know, degrees of humidity and the, you know, depth of the atmosphere and light diffraction and sun reflection and all that. They can make other predictions, okay? So some models are better than others, but everyone has a mental model. It is not an anti-intellectual thing to say, oh, well, you know, you've got your mental model. No, everybody's got a mental model. So I just want to go back to this notion of the 9% and the 95%. The understandability of stories by the 95%, I'll grant you that, Barry. Okay, I see that all the time. The problem is when the 95% chop off the 5%. In other words, if there's now a disrespect for truth, a disrespect for the search for truth, a disrespect for science, a disrespect for pursuing whether or not something is true, an examination of the truth. If that becomes culture, then we're a sick and dying culture. However, if the 95% understands there's a 5% out there that's not me, and I appreciate that we as a culture have that 5%, because those are the people that are building buildings, they're, you know, shipping me my food, they're building these computers, they're taking care of the internet, they're, you know, making me safe, they're looking at, you know, disease propagation. I'm glad we have those 5%. If that is the attitude of the 95%, then we have a healthy culture. The problem recently is because we have this prevailing disdain for truth in almost half of this country, that this country is phenomenally sick. They're trying to kill the truth so that those in power can use power for control rather than truth. And I think that is the problem that I see. And that's the problem I would really like to, you know, really understand. I don't decry anybody, their use of story, of art, of metaphor. I think all of that is great. It becomes a problem if the powers that be decide that truth can just be lopped off the space of conversation. I think one of the first things we have to do is to restore respect for truth, restore respect for science, restore respect for reasonable, rational discourse and experimentation and hypothesis creation and sense making. If we can get back to that, we will restore some hope, some optimism in my mind. But if we don't, that's where I think the challenge is. And sorry for the long rant, over.
And that's a great topic, by the way. I would love to go into how could one restore that.
Yeah, thanks. I think Heiner had his hand up though, okay.
Okay, it is not only linking back, but also forward. But I have Sam, what you were just saying is really close to me, because we have to bring all the representations together. Charles Sander-Peirce spoke about symbol, icon, and index. And if we just speak about stories and narratives, and someone else is just bringing in images, it is not enough. We have to bring all these representations together, maybe in a mental model architecture. And that is actually what Kim Feldman was working about. Barry, he was with Bell, and he was doing the perspective unit for McLuhan. So he's been really, I shared his series on alphabets of life. He's been looking into all the religions and developing an indexing paradigm. He called it SAMS, and you find it with the Maastricht McLuhan Institute in the Netherlands. to really bring all this augmented and virtual and merged and morphed realities together. Anyway, that is one of the pillars I would like to build on in the future, because I feel just believing here is a tribe into images, here is a tribe into narratives. It is not enough to really go to the solution space we need, given the problematic. My friend, like I was just with Aleko Christakis in a video conference, they have been presenting with the Wharton School 50 years about this. So it's actually a nightmare, but I would like to say I really enjoyed Barry and Glenn in this long session, and I'm on.
Josh, did you appear for a reason? And Colin's also got his hand up, and Alex has his hand up.
I appeared to show my face and listen to Colin with his hand up, or Alex, or whoever's got their hand up, and that's a thumbs up for what Heiner said. That's what that meant. Thumbs up to you, Heiner. Thank you. I can go back to not seeing my face if I'm too ugly. I understand.
No, that's a pretty good face there you got. I want to keep that one. I do find it's the synergy that we're looking for. And there's a lot of differences, especially when you're coming from a global context. So the context of religion has come up again, and I'm going to tiptoe and not try to bristle at the religion itself, but the coexistence of religions in a conversation. So I may be in a conversation where I have an opinion, somebody else has an opinion. That's not what I want to do here. I want to say that it would be nice if somebody else understood my opinion and if I understood theirs. And then they might be able to say, well, I guess I'm not going to convince him that he should do this particular ritual, but I trust that he's not out to harm me. So when it comes to the bigger picture of what we're discussing, let's put that issue behind us and not make it the topic. And Glenn said a lot of nice things, but then he started going against models, and he's right to go against models that are claiming things that they can't represent. So what I put in the chat is, let's put our effort in trying to prove the model's wrong if we can. Okay, otherwise the model isn't wrong still. It's the close approximation, but again, it's an approximation. Models are not for dogma people either. They're susceptible to change. And the model that people have in their heads is the one that we're kind of referring to here, their cognitive model. What their capabilities of understanding are, how long they can remember what was just said, and whether they're talking to somebody who has prepared their information or if they're just trying to intuit their way to some understanding. So an intuition conversation is much different than a lecture. And I think that they should be recognized as such. And if you don't understand the lecture, hopefully you have a recording, somebody that can help you with the language if it's not your native language. And you can dive into that because that's been prepared and ready and it's a model. If somebody's just intuiting, then they're kind of jamming. And if you don't enjoy jamming, then you should know that at the same time. Barry and I had an awful time jamming together, but boy, does he ever have a lot of good information, right? So the only thing I'm interested in Barry is how do we jam? I'll read his information as everybody gets that. But when it comes to Barry himself, it's how do we jam and whether it's worth it. And I think it is, but it's very difficult. And I challenged Glenn on, what was it that you think that is broken in models that you can't represent? And you came back with social models, theory of mind and stuff like that, which is, a very disputed field on a lot of ways. But when it comes to the science that Sam's talking about, I think it's a little bit more hard science. So we have to distinguish between what you mean by model. And I have to distinguish when I'm talking between when I'm using the word they or using the word you, which growing up, I guess there was just so few people around in the small town that it was always you. I don't know, but I have to do and when I write something out, I can edit it. And when I find videos like the ones we're making today, we can go back and take out important pieces. And the one Sam gave today was another good one. Barry gave a good one. So how do we extract those and put them a little bit higher than the noise in the background as we're trying to intuit? So allow people to intuit, allow people to be skeptical, and be open in your meaning and intention. And I think that will see you through. I still project that when you have arrogance, you have war. So anyway, there's a lot we could say about these things, but I'm very interested in this aspect as well of how do you filter out the noise in conversation so you can get to what's important. Otherwise, have at it wherever you are. But if it's going to be an important conversation, we should treat it with a lot more focus and respect and still keep it open somehow, right? And that's the signaling I think we need to learn.
Colin, I have to muscle in. You see, I'm in a deep fight now with all the system science schools, and we say there's also a general model theory. And a model is not a mathematical thing. It can be an artistic thing, it can be a performative thing. A model like a map is an abstract with less fidelity than the terrain, like Kurzbitsky says. So anyway, let's one day go into this general model theory of Herbert Stachowiak. He was stoned all his life, even when he was with Eric Jansch and all these people. And if you help me, you see, I have this incredible fights as all these cybernetic schools and system sciences schools and whatever, they even steal and bury and alter our systems and cybernetics encyclopedia, making it something for their sectarian turf. And there, in this fight, I'm deeply in and I'm totally lost. But I feel you here taking on different science systems according to Charles Sander Peirce and different ways of aesthetic representation. You are somehow on the level to maybe help and understand.
By the way, I should clarify, I think there was a little misunderstanding. The point I made about models was mistaking the model for the terrain. That's what leads to trouble. I agree that we all have models.
I think what leads to trouble is when you take a model dogmatically, and especially if it's built on emotion and not evidence.
Who was after you? Me.
Yeah, I think it's you, Alex. No.
It was Josh, Colin, Alex.
Because the topic is focusing on agreements and models, and we all have individual models. So when we combine our models with our higher thought processes, we come up with agreements. And if we want to stop these wars, we've got to recognize the cause of them, which is not what Colin suggests, disagreement in religion. It's corporations running the government, not the people. We know that people, 90% of the people don't want us to go to war. We still go to war because of vested interests. It's a small percentage. So if we can get the facts right and combine our higher thought patterns of thinking along with our scientific knowledge, we've got an opportunity to do something constructive, to bring together the fact that we are human and have values with the fact that we need to make important, rapid progress on climate change and CO2 reduction, stuff like that, planting trees, massive planting tree programs, and solar shade panels in orbit made from very thin graphene material. Huge things. Over.
Okay, Colin, then me.
I just quickly reply to Alex. My audio went out a little bit. Didn't hear everything, so if I misinterpreted, but I'd like to reframe what you said in the words that Heiner just used about not just looking backwards when he was talking to Barry, but also looking forwards when you're talking about corporations. So religion is backwards, forwards is corporations, and to a larger extent. But both of these things are forces of better, you could say, or try to be forces of better if all things are equal. I'm not saying every corporation out there is trying to do good, but I'm saying taking a standpoint that they're trying to do good. It's about better. And one corporation might have a different version of better than another corporation. One religion might have a different version of better than another religion. Some of it's in the past and has evolved, and very few religions from the past have made it to today, but we still have some. So there's very valuable stories in some way. It's the dogmatic parts of them I don't like. And it's the shame it puts upon other people I don't like. It's the blocking that they do that I don't like. It's not their uplifting emotional support. That's great. And, more of that, less of the false promises. Thank you.
I'm going to pick up on where Colin left because I think it's a nice segue. Okay, I'm going to bring back my notion of disappointment as my litmus test. Because I think, one way of restating what the basic scientific method is in colloquial terms, avoiding disappointment. And I think that if we find ways to understand, and I'll even use the word believe, okay, in things which lead us to living happy, productive lives and in happy, productive cultures, then there's very little disappointment in that, right? But if we actually have these mental models or, give them names, whatever you like, governance models, whatever, okay, values that lead to disappointment or lead to unhappiness or lead to guilt or lead to death or lead to disease. Those are opportunities to really say, okay, so what more can I learn that could, in a sense, minimize the degree of disappointment? To me, that's all science is. That's all life is. But if you remove that opportunity, if you just tell me what the answer is and there's no further exploration possible, that's the dogma that Colin's talking about. And that's the framing that religion sometimes brings, that is the downside of religion. And that is what I believe Colin and I agree on, that we're trying to fight. Where, religion closes off avenues of exploration. That's the problem.
Some religion does.
I'm not saying all do, but where the religion does that, that is the problem. That's what I'm trying to say.
And some institutions calling themselves scientific do exactly that same thing too.
Well, I believe that the true scientific method does not do that. The true scientific method may exist also outside the established, quote unquote, respected scientific institutions. They are not the sole and exclusive practitioners of science.
I
They're
wouldn't say
just people that get funding for it sometimes.
Are they practitioners at all?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are.
Exist any real scientific?
I think it's a very cynical view to say there aren't.
But purely scientific institutions, do they exist? I've never seen any.
Do purely religious institutions exist? Do purely good people exist? The same answer, Glenn.
Maybe very few, but it's not common.
But I think that's orthogonal to the point. You're now talking spectral distribution versus the model that I was trying to talk about.
which is coexistence, really, in my mind.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I'm really trying to really lay a firm foundation for. Okay. Because if we can say your religion is fine because, you know, I can enjoy it with you so long as it's, you know, making each of us happy, making us good neighbors, you know, giving us good conduct, you know, all those things are fine. But where you now tell me I have to live a certain way, or I have to cut off my baby's skin a certain way, or I have to, you know, eat this a certain time of day, and I'm not allowed to do that other thing. And oh, by the way, you're going to make me feel guilty for doing X, Y, Z. That's where I think we have problems. You're free to live according to those restrictions. I have no issue with that. But when you start exercising that power over just purely based on those beliefs, that's the problem. And
This is amazing unblocking. I feel heard. As well, another issue I have is about trying to filter people to different channels of conversation. It's not my job to tell people what to say and where to say it. I'm trying to say, is there a way that we can collectively find ways to further conversations that might not be interesting to everybody present or might need a lot more unpacking? I always enjoy people to unpack what it is that they have to offer, even if it takes a long time and it's usually their first time. So when Barry came, you know, he says, I feel like I've already done a presentation, you know. Well, I think he can do that presentation over and over and over again, get it on video and get a data butler for him to help him present. Because, you know, you need a real team to push these things forward. And if they're important, I think we can put the effort. Heiner is asking for this as well. I hear him asking for this in ways. How do we present? And Sam said, you know, I want to present. So first you got to have an idea that you strongly want to put your time into. It's fun to chat about anything that comes to our mind, and we're all full of trivia, which is all good. But, you know, how do we focus the trivia in with the important stuff? And that's where I get my hands slapped when I say, hey, are you guys being responsible to the time we have here? And, you know, people will say, well, who are you to say what I should say? And I'm not saying what I'm just raising the question, but raising the question of what people are talking about, or what, you know, if a religion claim comes up, whether you should challenge it or not, depends on what context it's in. If it has to do with the main thing you're talking about, then you can't avoid it. If it's just somebody's support structure, then, you know, let people have their support structures. It's when they start telling you what you have to do and shaming you, as Sam just said, that's when the problems arise. And I'm glad to be alive in a day and age when difference is finally starting to be accepted, whether I like it or not, right? So.
Hey guys, I have to log off soon, but just
hey, before you do, Glenn,
Mhm.
I'll let you make a statement, but before you leave, I just want to propose a slight change in format. Why don't you go ahead and finish your statement, and then I'll make a proposal for change in format and see what you guys think. But I didn't want you to leave before that.
Okay, yeah. It's been a really interesting discussion. I guess what I wanted to just mention before I leave is that I also feel that it is an incredibly important thing right now for the whole society, that we can have a respect for truth and for facts, and that we can have some kind of common frame of reference, and that there is a possibility for conscious conversation communities to make some progress there. And I feel that some of the thing that is lacking is actually real science, that the scientific methods often mentioned, and it's a beautiful idea, but it doesn't seem to me that there exists any institutions that really follow this method. Most research institutions, it's very much of the main data is proprietary. At least I don't see how proprietary systems can coexist with real science. I mean, for me, real science, one would have to have open sharing of data so that you could track it to its sources, and it has to be very transparent, and it also has to be multimodal, building on what Heiner's been mentioning, and it also has to be non-dogmatic, which arguably a lot isn't. Sheldrake has written a book about that. A lot of the people calling themselves scientists have a lot of dogma that they don't express, like believing that the universe is essentially dead and unconscious, that everything is dead except us. I don't know if that's a common view, but if it is, it doesn't seem very reasonable to me. At the very least, it's a dogma, it's a belief of some kind. But okay, those are big issues, of course, but at the very least, there seems to be a real opportunity to develop scientific institutions, or some kind of institutions that can really deliver high level sense making and build, facts that are solid, that can be accepted and verified by at least the vast majority of people, those who really are serious, and it can be very useful in all kinds of ways. And maybe what we call science today is a kind of prototype for that, but I feel there's an enormous opportunity for developing this a lot further, and not least if you could also do it in a way that includes yourself and that can lead to self-knowledge. So it's obviously some enormous possibilities that, as far as I can see, is relatively untapped so far in human culture. We talk some big words, and now and then, we're a little closer to it, but in the sort of organized sense of a collective intelligence that can really, build a database of solid knowledge. I think that would be worth pursuing. So I think some good conversations like these are certainly a part of that process. So yeah. So I think I'll just end it there, and yeah. All you guys, awesome to be with you.
Josh, did you want to go before I make my proposal?
Sure. I was just saying goodbye to Glenn. The only word that I keep hearing over and over again is organize, and then that brings me to the word organization. So as long as we're organized, meaning we're going through the steps, and at some point stopping and seeing what was said or written, and we're just clear about stopping and a starting point, I think we can all keep track of the conversation, and it makes perfect sense. And I don't want to interrupt the flow, so go right ahead, Sam. I would like to listen to how you're organizing in your mind.
Well, actually, I was going to interrupt myself. Okay, so here's my proposal. Okay, given that there was an appreciation for allowing everyone to bring their own focus and their own topic, and that seemed to be enjoyable in the past. And also recognizing, at least in my mind, that there is a broader arc to barn raising, I would like to propose that we make the second and fourth Saturdays ones where we can actually allow anyone to take it and run with it, moderate it, bring the topic, do whatever, and that I basically moderate and bring my topics on the first and third Saturdays. That still gives me an opportunity to make sure that continuation still flows. And so long as you guys are allowing me to do that, I really appreciate it. But it brings an opportunity on the second and fourth Saturdays for, let's say, Colin to talk about mapping, or Barry to talk about paradigms, or Glenn to talk about engagement, or Heiner to talk about I don't know, 50,000 things that Heiner wants to talk about. Okay. So, and Josh, like I said, you're welcome to, because I don't think you took an opportunity last time. So anyway, that's my proposal. And then the last question is, what do we do with a fifth Saturday in those cases where that happens? So anybody could take those, or I could take those, or we could call that a free Saturday since we don't often have that. So anyway, I'm open to all that as well. So that is what I'd like to lay on the table. Over. Josh, Colin.
Thank you. Is it okay, Colin? I can't see you. Yeah. Okay. So I was just going to say one thing that helps to make everybody heard and make the group collectively communicate faster is once we put a topic up, then break out into triads, rooms of 3, discuss those topics in rooms of 3, as opposed to everybody waiting for their turn. And then 5 or 10 minutes later, come back to the group and spend 5 or 10 minutes discussing with the group what came out of the triads, and then going back into another topic, or sticking with the same one and breaking back out into groups of 3 and then coming back. And it does help if you stay with the same group of 3, therefore you can have a little bit of intimacy during the 2-hour call, and then coming back to the group and saying, okay, out of that group of 3, who wants to speak for that group of 3 and say what you guys came up with. And it usually flows really well. I've done that in quite a few other Zoom sessions with other groups. And that way everyone feels heard, because it's a lot easier to be heard in a group of 3. I just want to put that out there as a possible, maybe something I would like to try on a day. Go ahead, Heiner. I'm complete.
I think Colin was next. Colin, then Heiner.
I'll give my time to Heiner. We got a system.
Yes, I got a system. No, Josh, I like this idea. We've been playing with it in citizens' assemblies, but my experience is only that everybody can speak and hear is not really scaling. We really have to come in large groups to focus. And that's why we have this spreadsheet besides the round table, where we highlight the topics and dynamically, without a moderator, have like a swarm going to this theme and giving there the attention, call it token time credits, and then it is floating. This is how brain research shows us really. It is not a network from one neuron to one neuron, there's an information flow, but it is really like a stream, like, how do you say, a hive thing happening, where the focus in group has to be also visualized in our conversations. Otherwise, we are separating and separating and separating.
Yeah, that's why I was proposing. I really like the idea of individuals trying to moderate. We started the first one, and when I did it, Josh may remember, I reached out to him because I wanted someone to help me being a co-host or a data butler, so that I didn't have to run all the technical aspects of keeping focus while I was trying to present something that wasn't quite ready yet to present. It's a work in process. So it takes the thought part of your creative part of your brain while you're trying to, on the other side, be administrative. It's a bit of an overload. So I like that idea. I've learned from it that I wasn't ready, and good examples of people who have spent their time trying to put their ideas to paper and focus those ideas are good examples of people who are, honing the idea. So that's what I call getting ready. So I hope next time, if I have an opportunity, I'll be more ready. Because I don't think my ideas are simple to present, but they are actually quite simple once you understand them. Flow charts of thought, right? And what's important, like Heiner has his set up in a spreadsheet of how many time does each person have, and at the beginning, and if somebody's talking about something that flows, other people can offer up their time to the person who's speaking, and that's a way of voting for interest towards somebody. So I think we do that when a new member comes. We all instinctively give that new person who shows up more time to explain themselves, and you know, so I think it is looking into the future of how I want to present better, what I want to put my ideas into, is the key to be better understood. When you're dealing with something complicated, like how do we have conversation, navigation, filtering, and enhancing. And one of the things I've noticed, and I'll just say this in closing, going back to a video that you didn't bother to interrupt and then doing a response on top of that video, I think is a new thing I'm going to be doing some of. Right now, I'm doing it without putting any of my own commentary because it's usually not about me, right? So, and what I'm interested in and becoming unperplexed, vexed and perplexed, I think Barry says, you know, maybe there's a better channel for me to get unvexed and unperplexed. And maybe it is the topic and maybe my question will be valuable. So I like the idea of having breakouts of 3 to focus on something. And I think that naturally happens with people like Heiner's been tapping me, and I'm not exactly sure what he wants yet, but I think I'm following along. And that's the way you work with Heiner. He taps you. If you expect to have his full undivided attention, as who was it? Somebody was giving him a hard time about not being available. Heiner's all over the place. So knowing how to adapt to Heiner is a learning experience, or Barry or Sam or anybody for that matter. So the point being is time is filtered into channels, and naturally those offshoot sprouts of 2, 3, 4, 5 people will happen. How do we do them here? I don't know. That's defining what the GCC we is, as opposed to a project that somebody's doing here and has interested people from the GCC. So even though if I present something or Heiner presents something and we start working on something together, that doesn't actually mean it's a GCC thing, but we kind of came to the GCC to meet up. And I think that's what Josh's big point is, you know, as well, that everything isn't always done here. So it's around these models of following the interest and supporting each other. And if one way we can do that, I think is very interesting, is what Sam said about, after all said and done, are you focused? Are you ready to present something? And if it didn't work last month, maybe you'll get a second chance to get another 15 minutes. Like, I don't think we'll need a whole show for an individual to present something specific to them. As we get more familiar with what the person's doing, it'll become more like updates, hopefully, because I hope we're not working from scratch all the time. So how we build that memory and onboard people to that memory, I think is key to the collective intelligence that Sam has outlined many times. So that's kind of where I'm pointing my effort, towards that collective memory of what's important. It doesn't have to be what I'm thinking about, because really I'm thinking in the meta, you know. I don't really have a presentation as such, like, you know, how to play the pentatonic scale backwards or something. I don't know, you know, or how to program in Python. I don't think anybody wants to learn about that, you know, but community building and channels and signaling and mental models of how you share your time, that is something I'm interested in. And like, I think Sam has made that point a couple times today already. And that's why I keep coming back when people are, when I fail and get negative results from people, I don't take that personally. I say, oops, I failed. Hopefully I can make amends and that person will understand me better, because I'm not out to offend anybody unnecessarily. Not useful. Anyway, thanks.
I haven't heard any objection to my actual proposal. I just wanted to see if we actually proceed with the proposal as is anyone here going to be offended?
No,
Alex?
I guess the thing is if you make them variable, like 2 Saturdays a week can be more serendipitous, which could be somebody presenting something, or maybe, I don't know.
Sure, but let's just try something, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a great idea.
Let's learn from the whole process. Alex, you had your finger up?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Audio. My camera dropped out, but I was proposing an idea that it's been going around in my head about a Wednesday session on Zoom called Wonderful Wisdom on Wednesday.
Set it up.
just to see how much action it would get, how many people would turn up.
Right.
But
There's 160 hours each week that's all available, you know? It doesn't have to be just the 4 sections we got right now.
Before I started, I want to generate some interest from the group. So that means talking on the discussion, and I can't post to Facebook. I've been blocked from posting in the comment section.
Really?
Yeah, and I can't create a group on Facebook. I'm blocked from all those administrative tasks I usually was able to do, commenting and replying to comments. But I can work on Messenger. I can use the private Messenger to comment, and I can comment on my own pages that I've created, but nowhere else. I'm blocked. I'm censored from Facebook.
Did Facebook send you a note, or did somebody else do that directly to you?
They said I've violated the community standard conditions of
Yeah,
the
Facebook has done that to me at least a half a dozen times.
terms and conditions. So it happens for 14 days, and then at the end of that 14 days, I can comment for a couple of hours, but then it comes back in for another 14 days. So it's a bot, or it's a human. Over.
Okay, well, without objection, I'm going to act as if that proposal has been, in a sense, adopted. We'll see if anybody objects as we go into it, okay? All right, Josh.
Yep, I'm not objecting. I think it's a great proposal. I just wanted to add the dimension of how many people regularly come to the barn raising on Saturday and what the time frame is to give everybody after 2 Saturdays. That would be about 3 months, or when does that end, that this proposal? What is the end
I
date
have
where we
not
stop and
thought
say?
about it in any detail. So last time
Okay.
we went for probably 3 or 4 months, maybe more.
Okay.
Nobody seemed to have a problem with that. Then we had a session where, you know, anybody else want to? Nobody stepped forward. So that's why we ran out of presenters. Now I'm just seeing whether we want to reopen it up again. So until we get inundated with a number of people who want to do this, it doesn't seem like a volume problem to me yet.
Okay, and so it's to run out of presenters, meaning once it starts looping back around where everyone's presented once, then we
I'm just saying,
stop
you know,
and take a look
anybody
at
who
it.
wants to should step forward, right? We're just saying, you know,
Yeah.
at that last round, nobody stepped forward again, you know?
I guess I'll just be clear with my question. My question is, when do you want to stop? Meaning after everyone's presented once, and then if new people come in, that could go on to infinitum, or how does that work?
I have not thought about that yet. I'm open to either.
Okay. Okay, fair enough.
I would just like to remember you that we called it deep dive before we called it hot seat. And there was in deep dive and telling stories, a long queue. And then we joked, this is good for 1 or 2 years because everybody was leaning into making 3, 4, 5 sessions, which is also good. But then you have this long queue. It is much, much better to make a list of offerings and then through dynamic voting, see where the interest is. And then have presentations for 10 or 15 minutes. That's why what I always was pushing, because then you have maybe another hour for discussion. If you make presentations for weeks, then nobody remembers what you said the first week.
Heiner, I think you're welcome to propose that and run that.
I was thinking as well, Alex had a suggestion for a show, but I would think during barn raising, I've mentioned this before, people like Barry, Heiner, Neil Davidson, anybody that has a lot of models. We could have like a model jam show where you get like, 3 to 5 minutes, show your model, explain your model, put the links in the chat, move on to the next model. Just a model splash show that's just kind of serendipitous. That would be a fun show. Another one was Josh said about science. We could just have a science show where we, show our sciences. And I tried to outline those things on the map. Definitely I've learned about how I want to be understood better, where I think the time would be valuable to put in. And so I believe with what Heiner's saying, if you're ready, you should be able to express a lot of information in 15 minutes, as opposed to, 8 shows about somebody's life. I don't know. Maybe I still think there's a time and place for that, but it just doesn't feel like a barn raising thing. And I think it started the deep dives because somebody came to a conclusion that we needed to search for people's emotional state and their triggers before we were able to collaborate together. I'd like to revisit how that happened, because I think it's important, but got overemphasized. And so there's a couple other things I could have mentioned, but I will let that go. Something about Sam, 15 minutes. Yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah, you guys are each welcome to present those models and moderation methods. In fact, step forward. I would say Josh, Colin, Heiner are all essentially in the queue for upcoming Saturdays. Barry, you want to try it? Kayla, Tees?
Are you asking me if I want to do a presentation?
Take a Saturday or a part of a Saturday and make it all about Barry and what Barry wants us to think about.
Yeah, I could. I mean, I've been writing for 35 years, so I'd have to figure out which 10-minute item, would make sense. A lot of my stuff is like a semester's worth of content at the graduate level, so that's not going to work in 15 minutes.
How about an overview of your work? And we could map it out like I did for Heiner, because, Heiner's got so much stuff. What's new? What's old? What does he want us to look at?
How can you put 10 volumes into 10 minutes? I don't know.
Well, you just got to get out a map and get high level.
Have you ever seen, in Doug Hofstadter's book, Gödel, Escher, Bach, he has a 1-page semantic network. It's a diagram with little nodes and lines connecting them. And every single meme, every single topic that he spent a page or two on is one little bubble. And then they're all connected by lines. And he calls it an example of the semantic network of the very book it's in. Have you ever seen it? You're muted, Colin.
Yeah, I've seen the hypertext books within hypertext. Yes.
So the point is that you could look at that 1-page map. It's literally what you're talking about, a map of ideas that are all connected. And
actually, I got about 5 kinds of maps. Just like I think there's many times of conversations and formats that we could use. So that's one of my pet peeves when somebody says a map. It's like, okay, which kind of map?
Semantic network. That kind
of
map.
I'd say, yeah, and I would say a lot of the maps that I'm talking about are the messy ones where we're trying to figure out what somebody has and what they would like to highlight, as opposed to a final map so people can find themselves around Middle Earth in a book. So you can have both kinds, a finished map or an exploratory map. I'm more into the exploratory maps with this group because it seems like we're all exploring.
Then I would probably not participate, because when I'm in an inchoate state where I have very vague ideas, I don't even have a map. I just have little pieces of jigsaw puzzles floating around, and nothing fits together yet, and it's not coherent. And so I don't want to present something that's incoherent and inchoate.
Well, maybe what I'm talking about is like maybe what Heiner did with Doug. He did an interview where Doug was the moderator interviewing Doug about, or sorry, Doug was the moderator interviewing Heiner about all his nodes. And, if you have a memory to follow up, people say, well, what was Barry talking about? It could be as simple as a bunch of links in the bottom of the YouTube video. And then you hold that. So it's honing our message. And your message is you have a lot of messages. Maybe, I don't know.
I would rather have Stacy come in and say, Stacy would say, I paid attention to one of Barry's little models and I wrote an article about it. Here's what I gleaned from one little piece of Barry's writings. And this is my takeaway. I'd rather have Stacy come and say what she learned. Then I would learn something about whether she learned anything that were related to what I was writing.
I think that's a great idea. But to me, that's like during a regular barn raising where someone could take 5 minutes and explain, this is Barry, introduce Barry again. And this is what I really liked about him. And this is where I did a springboard off of his work.
Hey, Colin, can you see my background?
Oh, yeah, that's the
oh,
exact, yes. Joshua has
There you
the
go.
semantic network from Douglas Hofstadter's book,
Yes.
Gödel Escher Bach. And every one of those little circles is like, I don't know, maybe a page or two of essentially a meme that he writes about. And by the way, I don't know if you can scroll to the bottom left. There's one link to the bottom left called Jumping Out of the System. I don't know if you probably can't read it, but down at the bottom left, there's one line that goes to the edge of the page, and it's called Jumping Out of the System.
Yeah, I'm just cautioning you, Colin, because that's a 16-hour conversation just to touch on 1/100th of the map. So
Yes.
I think that's what Barry's getting at is really take a look at how much work, because I've grokked Barry's work and I've gone through it and I've gotten about 0.7% through it, and it's taken about 1.5 years. So I'm just
Data doesn't scare me. I've seen many relationship maps of databases and things, but yes, one of the things I found, as you can demonstrate behind you, is that you need to have submaps. So there should be only 10 points on that top map if somebody's going to actually try to navigate it. But this is where somebody tried to put it all on one, which is okay for him and other people that know what he is doing. It's not very good for someone trying to figure out where they should start, which is where I've failed in my mapping, helping people where to start. And
That
how
book was transformational. I read that book when it came out, I think around 1980. That fundamentally changed my way of thinking so profoundly that I can say it changed my life.
that sounds very interesting. I'm just looking
as it did my life too.
I'm looking at the lines of how that one infographic is displayed. And Heiner actually, I think, came up with the term infographic. Like, is that true, Heiner?
Yes, 85. But this is not the point. You see, many people, not just Barry, we have so many things, but how to condense them and make them digestible. Bibi was trying with such a playlist, bringing all these ways of making experiments together, what we exercised through the years. But I think the best, and I think I could show it in one of the next Saturdays, is where I asked Harry to describe me in 5 minutes. You have seen glimpses of it, and I showed it with John Paul, but this 5 minutes is actually seeing with other eyes, and this is what I'm talking about. Maybe I share that.
Just to give you an example of a takeaway from Gödel Escher Bach, I would say to Colin, my guidance to you, Colin, is to take no guidance from me, including this piece. That's the kind of thing you get out of reading Gödel Escher Bach.
Always within context, but for now, open context. I guess you're the host now, Barry.
Really? Does it say that?
No. I mean figuratively. Sam isn't here, so go for it.
Okay. Yeah. What? Just to throw in a word, what Gödel Escher Bach was about is the concept of recursion. Recursion is a very, very powerful word with a very, very deep meaning and very hard to understand. There's a lot of examples of attempts to introduce the concept of recursion, and they actually go back all the way to the Old Testament, or maybe before that, but I didn't read the much literature before that. Excuse me, let me make sure that that's not important. No, okay.
I'm saying goodbye. Good to see everybody. Cheers.
There is a word that occurs a lot in theology. In the Old Testament, which is written in Hebrew, the word is Sheol, S-H-E-O-L. And it literally means pit, like you dig a pit in the ground, literally means pit. And the corresponding modern rendering of that is, this is the pits. This is just the pits. And the word pit, Sheol, appears in the New Testament, but not in the Hebrew, Sheol. It appears as a couple of other words, which modern usage is hell. The word hell in modern English corresponds to Sheol in the Old Testament, the pits. And in the New Testament, I think it's Gehenna. And Gehenna was actually a place, a physical geographic place. Outside of Jerusalem, there was a dump, a dump where you would take your trash. And it was always on fire. And if you went anywhere near this fire pit, this trash dump called Gehenna, it stunk like hell. I mean, as you can imagine. But one of the reasons it was notorious, and not just a trash dump, is that there was a group of people who worshiped a deity named Moloch. Moloch is just a variation of the word king. Melech, Moloch, they're all based on the same root word, but Moloch was a deity, and the followers of Moloch had a ritual that they would sacrifice their children by throwing them in the fire pits of Gehenna, the dump. That was their practice. And somewhere in the Old Testament, you'll find that the priests of the Old Testament wanted to outlaw this cultural practice. It wasn't Jewish practice, it was a different tribe. But there is a prohibition. You do not burn your children. You do not sacrifice your children to the god, of the fire dump. So, and any culture that had that was a hellish culture. It's the pits. Now, how do you want to take it? Do you want to take it as theology, or want to take it as just common sense, or just a dumb idea, a dumb practice? I don't care how you characterize it, but it goes back. The root of this concept goes back to the Old and New Testament, and the modern word is hell. But what is hell?
Interesting.
If you want to take the concept analytically, mathematically, it's an untamed recursion. You can have a recursion which is useful because it's tamed, and it leads to, it converges to a desirable outcome. And you can have an untamed recursion, which just goes kaflooey, it blows up.
That's a control system out of control.
Exactly. And it's easy to take a feedback loop, and if you turn up the gain, you get feedback, audio feedback, and it just blows up. And so a feedback loop can be well tuned, and it converges to the desired. So you set up your thermostat just right and your furnace just right, and it will just very nicely bring the temperature up to what you want and then pause. Or your cruise control will very nicely bring the car to the right speed and then steady. It won't overcycle. It won't go kaflooey. So a recursion is a very powerful mathematical idea. And the worst case is an out of control recursion, one that blows up. And the old word for that was hell.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. Like all the things you just explained were very interesting. I see it like one of the documentaries. So you definitely could do this type of stuff and give many barn raisings. But which ones do you want to put your time into?
The ones that people are interested in listening to. If they're not interested in listening to it, then I'm not going to do it, because what's the point?
Yeah. Well, I'm part of the 5% that likes to listen to things that don't need to have a music track and 4 prayers behind it. But but I'm interested in learning, and I'm curious, and I try to think that I've got my values in a good way where I could show the values that people have in this group, and we could add your values to the map. But to back up a little bit from what you just presented, it's like it's very interesting, number one, to have history. History is very interesting because it is a written record of how the dominoes fell, if you got the real history, that is. And we're in the after show, so I don't feel like we're stealing time anymore. Anybody that doesn't want to be in the after show can just log off, right? And so, maybe we should add that to the model of a show. From the first 2 hours is focused, and then anybody wants to hang around afterwards, it's beers and shalom or whatever words we want to talk about. which is good. So I feel like I can take a little more time, and which I'm not going to take much, and reply in the vein of what Sam was talking about. And the question you asked is the religious connotation misinterpreted in the story. I think in this case, the religiousness explains how the story happened and some language that was developed. But what people would consider hell today would be far removed from that idea of out of control recursion. Or I shouldn't say removed, different examples of this recursion, because I do think that people can put themselves in a mental hell where they think that, their thoughts keep recursing. And, that's why a lot of therapy tries to get you to not think too much. Wise person told me life depends upon not thinking too much. So, you can, but, there's a balance. And I do think that history part of it is interesting. Trying to extrapolate and say, there you go, put a bow on it is a little bit more difficult. So same thing with Jordan Peterson. I love a lot of his background knowledge and stuff, but then when he tries to extrapolate the point, I don't always agree with him. So, and it's good on him for trying. And he says on stage, I am spitballing. I'm working this out as I'm talking. So I give him that opportunity to correct himself. And I look at the commentary. Another one I think religion is where, put a hand grenade in our foxhole. Talking about Deepak Chopra, Glenn was starting to get into that stuff. Like, does the world have consciousness? Or is everything connected consciously? Well, no, but there are some connections that we don't know. So let's figure out what those are. We just can't say all and everything. When people start talking about all of this or all of that, I automatically say that can't be, unless they're actually talking about cosmos, and then I'll give it to them, right? So
tell us Sagan's definition of the cosmos.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was going to ask you to do it.
Oh, I don't know. I don't have it memorized.
All right. Well, I will recite for you. And this, by the way, is in the overtime from Saturday early in January. In Cosmos, Carl Sagan begins every episode with this little repeated clip. He says, the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. All that is, or ever was, or ever will be. And do you remember that I said that string of words, that phrase, had a different word other than the word cosmos attached to it, way back in the literature?
I can't spell it. I think it's in Hebrew or Greek. I think you showed me that. Being, all of being, was it?
You're close. In fact, we had, it's interesting because we're in overtime now. 60 Minutes, the TV show has 60 Minutes overtime, where you can go to the website and see everything that didn't fit in the original 60 Minutes. And you and I were in overtime on one of these, I guess it was a Saturday barn raising, maybe 3 weeks ago. And Sam came at the very end saying, we're coming up on 4 hours and I have to shut you guys down because I need the channel back. And just as Sam came in, this is exactly what we were talking about, this exact same conversation, And I asked you the same question, what was the title of Michelle Obama's autobiography?
It was, Believe. No, it was so easy.
Or may I answer?
Go ahead, please.
Becoming.
Exactly. Becoming. Close to being, it's a version of the verb to be, but it's what in grammar is called a gerund. And a gerund is stretching it out over time. So you could say, I was, past tense, I am, present tense, I will be, future tense. But if you use the word becoming, you're sort of telescoping all time into one word. And so when Carl Sagan says the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be, you can go back and find almost the exact same expression in the book of Exodus in the Old Testament, where Moses is he's spitballing in his head. Moses is trying to think, he's barely a teenager, and he's trying to figure out what is his role in life going to be. And he's thinking in his head, what is his calling going to be? And in a sense, he's talking to God in his head. This is the famous burning bush story, if you want to find the origin. And finally, so he he's having this conversation with his deity, and he says, by the way, he says, I don't know your name. I know your title. You're the deity, but do you have an actual name? Like Colin is your name. Okay. And the answer comes back, I am all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. I am in the process of becoming. I am becoming. That's the same story as in Carl Sagan says, the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. And Michelle Obama says, my life, my autobiography is becoming. Now, becoming is a perfectly secular word, but it's also the name of the deity of the Old Testament.
Yeah, I would like to riff on the idea of the secular aspect of it. In reference to what we were talking about today, about looking in the rearview mirror, as Doug calls it. I don't know exactly what context he relates around that, so I can't really comment on what exactly Doug means by looking in the rearview mirror is a waste of time or not effective. I can't speak well for Doug. We're working on it, but I am trying to propose that this becoming is including the rearview mirror. And a saying I heard one time is, the past should be used as guideposts, not hitching posts.
Yeah.
And that's the part of the rearview mirror I like. And that's why it's history. You can't change it, but you can learn from it and see how it repeats and rhymes, because it's kind of being implemented by this ape culture called humans, right? So I think that becoming is important because it includes the future and the past and the now. And when is it important to focus on the now? Or do you have to focus on the now and the future at the same time? Or, are these things possible? So, in conversation flow with a larger group, is it possible? In a conversation with yourself, is it possible? So I think the becoming is a really good theme of all, including. I do agree with that. When it gets into being the religious connotation, I just have to cut that off and say it's history, because I don't think you believe there is I can ask if there's a real hell, or if somebody was actually talking to somebody in the burning bush, or if that was just something that was mentally playing in their head.
Allegory.
It's allegory, right? So when people use it for allegory, I think it's very powerful. It's when people start saying, and therefore the earth is 6,000 years old, then I have to say, well, is it important that this person thinks the world's 6,000 years old? Maybe it's not. Maybe they're
Western
the person.
Civilization is 6,000 years old, roughly.
Well, I don't know what it didn't specify in Genesis the time in between creating light and creating man, but it's kind of fuzzy. But anyway, the point is to rise up above that. And if you're in a conversation with people who can't rise up above that, you should know that you're going to have to, I think, as someone mentioned today, recalibrate your engagement style. And we got to be careful. And you're saying everything is a story. I believe everything is a story. Bebe is trying to do things through stories. But I came across something from an interesting website. I put it in the chat, that humble stories can be used to manipulate people because they have, add in a little bit of music in the background and a prayer at the end. And you're close to manipulating people. And that's another conversation. When can I step back from my opinion, give my opinion when it's appropriate, but step back from it, as Heiner says, and allow room for other opinions. If you don't allow room for other opinions to at least be heard, then that's the violation of arrogance. I think you think your opinion's more important and the other ones don't matter. You might be a narcissist. Not you, the person who does that might be a narcissist. So I think those are part of the people conversation adapters, now labeled simply conversation adapters. Forget about the people. I'm not sawing off arms or anything, but it's a cognitive thing, and it's a messy area, and it's kind of where I was trying to play with you, where we failed. So, but I can definitely use your lessons in helping my thinking, especially when curious, intelligent people have so much to offer in background and history. So, I think that's a superpower of yours, Barry. I don't think Sam I could be wrong, was criticizing the fact that you do it. It's just how much religious connotation follows it in a non-allegorical way.
Well, for example, take the word theory, perfectly secular English word theory. Sam talked about it. Several of us talked about theory. Our modern word theory comes from a Greek word, theoria, 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 which literally means I behold. I behold, I observe, I behold. Theoria, theory. Now, the equivalent word in Hebrew is Torah. Torah. Torah means science or theory. If you look up the dictionary word Torah, lowercase, in Hebrew, it just means theory or science. The document called the Torah, if you were to translate the title, the Torah, you would translate it in English as customary system of guidance. Just how to, this is some guidance on how to live your life that has some scientific or theoretical foundation to it. You behold what happens in the world around you, and that's some guidance for what's going to happen in the future, because it's all governed by the same underlying laws of nature. So customary system of guidance, that would be a useful handbook to have. 3,500 years ago, they called it the Torah, the science, the theory, the beholding.
Yeah, I think Sam mentioned too that, you know, all of our knowledge comes out of, I believe, comes out of religious efforts. Now, there might be some areas where that's not true, but religion has always been the game, you know, starting from wondering what thunder is, probably, and sacrificing chickens.
Good example.
And then as time goes on, you know, you discover things about nature that might better explain the allegories. And I think we're getting down to conversations between the 95% who are able to just do the ones that the stories are made for, right?
The layperson.
The layperson
doesn't do mathematical theory analysis stuff.
So I think that's always so important, and I actually make that mistake here in this group, not being able to distinguish between when I'm talking to somebody who's actually listening to me or somebody who's actually thinking about the next thing they're going to say.
Or has their eyes closed.
Yeah, and that's why I think the tactic that I can use, the presentation method I can use, is through video presentation that's annotated and has a warm data lifespan of X amount of time.
And it's prepared. Be prepared.
But it's warm data, but it's not the finished product, but it has been aligned in a way with a framework of some sort so that it stays from out without going into hell, right? Without spiraling off. Because there is going to be to getting ready, there's going to be what you call an iterative process. And that is, in a way, recursion. And it's putting the proper time into that iterative process. So anyway, I'll let Kayla come on.
Yes, we'd love to hear from Kayla. Kayla has not said a word.
We're in the after show, Kayla. Anything goes.
I've been so exhausted lately. I just got out of the shower, put on my makeup, and then took a short. I laid down for a little bit, took a little bit of a nap. So I'm so sorry I haven't had a chance to hear what everybody's has to say. But just wanted to recap. Who's talking next weekend? Did we just?
This, what was it, second and fourth Saturdays are going to be somebody presenting. So I don't know if that's going to start
Saturday
next
is the fourth Saturday. So according to the model, Sam is going to do the even numbered. Is that right? Even numbered?
Yeah.
So next Saturday is the fourth Saturday. So that's an even number. So it'll be Sam in the hosting seat.
Okay.
It might be one that we present. We figure it out.
I propose taking the first and third, but next Saturday is actually the 5th, I believe.
Is it? Okay.
That's why I was willing to go either way on it.
What time zone?
I don't do math in my head too good. I have to do it carefully.
Okay, we'll go March and time zone here. Okay. Anyway,
I'm gonna check out for a little bit, but
Kayla, do you
my-
ask that because you might want to take next Saturday?
no.
She was sleeping, Sam. She can't be rewarded.
All the more reason, you know, we give the sleepers the task.
Tell us what you dreamt about.
I don't know. Maybe
No,
next time could be building that list Heiner's talking about. I don't know. We already kind of did it. Sam's quite intuitive at it.
So my gift to myself on Valentine's Day is moving. So next Saturday would be kind of, I'll be indisposed for at least 2 weekends, but next Saturday will be my last Saturday to be present while I take a break to move, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to be mentally prepared so that I'm not so exhausted and I can be there for you guys.
So we think Sam will be hosting a normal, quote unquote, normal session next.
Are you talking, Barry?
I did ask whether anybody wanted to take the next Saturday.
And nobody answered, correct?
Nobody has stepped forward yet.
Okay.
There's been a lot of proposals by Josh, by you, by Heiner, by Colin.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could do more proposals and focusing. And if somebody steps up with something interesting, let them run with it. But I do want to put my effort into the memory side of things to continue important conversations. So, and there's so many of them to choose from. Nobody feels slighted if I haven't made a gem of you yet, but definitely put your proposals in and hopefully they'll get better and gain some interest. But yeah, I really like the idea of bringing that back. That was one of the complaints I had. I didn't mention it during the main show, but Sam says that nobody had complaints about doing these self-moderated shows. I didn't have any complaint about doing them, but getting the lessons learned and feedback and stopping them, I had a complaint about. I thought they should have continued. I think this is perfect to do it at halftime. So two Saturdays is about out of a month. Sounds like a really good starting idea.
Let me jump in here. We talked about main show and after show, and I always play on the backstage or on the side stages. But what I did with Harry and Tammy was something like a rehearsal. If someone presents something for 7, 10, or 15 minutes, I had with Tammy and Harry this rehearsal to really be sure you make it in 7 minutes. Be sure that you're reaching the people. And that's why I'm missing Tammy so much. Where the hell is she?
Where the hell is she? She's recursing.
Where's the heavens? Is she?
She's recursing somewhere else, or just cursing.
Did you hear that? Me saying she's recursing? Yeah, I think that's great, Sam or Heiner, and maybe that's a goal to look forward to, that after somebody has done a show or two, that they can boil it down into the 7-minute version, because it seems to be impossible here first off the first crack. Glenn doesn't even get started until 7 minutes has gone by, and he's got a lot to say. He's done, and anybody who doesn't know, Glenn has done some videos of him walking in the woods talking about things. I thought that was a fascinating idea, that if you have something to say, like, there's going to be people interested in that. I watched them. It was hours. I didn't watch all of them to the end, but I'd put them on in the background and then start doing housework. I couldn't watch them because the camera was going all jiggity, but as he's walking with his cell phone, but his words were good. So, you could, I think it's about getting ready. And I've said that if we have a message, there's a short, long, and a medium version. There's the 2-minute version, the 5-minute version, and the 15 to half an hour version. And Barry said that he had to cut his really short, which means that, he's pretty ready if he knows how to cut it short. He's got lots of material. That's another part of being ready. He's thought about it, wrote it down. He can send you a link. That's what it means to be ready. So it's just a matter of focusing on what's important, I think, is what I want to push forward.
Maybe Kayla remembers she raised an issue about, I think, one of your own children or some child who had emotional problems that was interfering with learning. And I took about maybe 20 minutes to provide a very concise model of the role of emotions in learning. And as I recall, Kayla, you said that was very helpful. This has been about 2 months ago.
Right. Yeah. It was probably one of the first times that you've ever come on.
I think it was, well, maybe the second time.
No, that was really helpful.
Thank you.
I think we were talking about my ex-husband though.
Maybe I didn't get who the other person was. I was thinking it was a child, but yeah, if it could be, it doesn't, it could be anybody or yourself.
Yeah. That's why I was asking, are you going to talk about that? Because
I could. The thing is that, I mean, what I presented the day you were there was a very, very fast 20-minute teaser snapshot of the core ideas. But fundamentally, it's a 1 or 2 semester graduate level course if you really go into it. Obviously can't do that in Zoom and certainly not in 10 minutes. That would it would be flooding people with more depth than they can handle. But I try to just sort of give a teaser on that time that you were there, and wasn't sure if if anybody was going to get it. But you said you got something out of it, so that was useful feedback.
Just to interrupt that, and Heiner mentioned when Tammy came, she was doing one-on-one interviews with people, and I saw that as one of her superpowers. And if we did get her back, I hope she would do one of you, Barry.
That'd be fun. I've done podcasts where I was invited to be the guest for the hour on an audio podcast, and in both cases, I was able to take the audio and transform it into a transcript. And boy, that was hard back in those days, because they weren't as good as YouTube's. They were terrible. I had to spend like a couple of hours correcting all the mistakes. But it turns out there are something like 2 different hour-long transcripts of a podcast where somebody who is a regular interviewer did interview me for a podcast. And you can, and like YouTube, they scroll the text in sync with the audio, and you could play it at different speeds, just like you can on YouTube. So you can bring up the podcast and just watch it, text scroll on down. And if you click on it, it'll jump to that spot.
Can you link to that podcast? I'd like to hear the audio.
Yeah, I don't know if I could find, it's coming up on the top of the hour. I don't know if I have time to find it in the next 5 minutes.
Well, Heiner has a couple hundred too, and I have a map of Heiner's, all of his stuff with a bunch of Bebe's art on it and stuff that I never did go do a demo of. And so, I probably would do a demo, but I'd send it to Heiner first instead of just posting it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting people who've put a lot of thought into things are few and far between. So I think highlighting people who have something to offer, and people like Kayla, who's not afraid to ask.
It was a fabulous question. Just happened to be that I was ready to provide a technical answer on that one.
Yeah. I've had experiences like that as well, not online, but in private. But yeah, it's a two-way street. So in this conversation that Sam's looking for, or interview, instead of just, I know how hard it is, and I think it's all in the preparation. As Heiner just mentioned, if you really want to go for it, get a little team together and do a dry run or a practice. I think these are great ideas.
Earlier, I heard Sam mention Barry T about teaching, and it was something in the context of lecturing versus conversation.
Yes.
I'd be very, very interested in what you had presented in your 20-minute snapshot the very first time you came on here, and to kind of elaborate and make that more of a conversation as opposed to a lecture. And I was wondering if you would be able to do that.
Yes, in fact, you probably were in the shower when I said it, but the second or third time I gave that talk to a technical audience at a conference, I did it just that way. Instead of presenting the material, I did it by the Socratic method. I would ask the audience a question, and as they answered it, they were exactly providing the content of the slides. So as soon as I got the answer from the audience, I would show the slide that reified what they had just said. And I did the whole talk by the Socratic method. It was like 40 minutes in a technical. Frontiers in Education was the name of the conference, mostly teachers.
Well, if you do that next weekend, I'll be there.
Yeah, I don't know how easy to do it on Zoom. it's a different technology format, but I could try, I mean, we could try it. I don't know how well it would work. But, you know, but that, yeah, I've done it. That a lot of talks I give, I do it by the Socratic method. I invite the audience to answer questions, and they literally construct the talk that I would have given if it had been a lecture.
That's cool.
It's fabulous when it works. Because the audience thinks that they figured it all out by themselves. And in a sense they did, but the prompting was the questions. The Socratic questions is the key to getting people to construct the theory that, you know, it took me, you know, 30 or 15 years to construct the theory before I attempted to present it.
Yeah.
Because
I was just thinking, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because you have to figure out what's the right question to ask at each step. That's not obvious.
Yeah. Earlier this week, I was thinking, usually the GCC during these barn raising sessions and, you know, some of the meetings in general have these reoccurring themes, whether it's intentional or not. Then I started thinking, you know, when I'm teaching my kids or helping to teach my kids because they're still distance learning, you know, oftentimes they need to be reminded, and we adults need that too. So again, I'm really interested in what you had to say previously to say it again. Yep. So I could absorb it again.
Sure. In fact, that material, being that it's essentially a semester-long graduate level course, you would probably want to pass through it like at least 3 times. That video that Nora Bateson and Dave Snowden did on Wednesday for the Systemic Leadership Summit, I've watched it now 4 times, and each time I watch it, I get more out of it because it's so dense with fabulous content.
Ooh, I'm gonna watch that then.
That's right. That's why you get your packed 15 minutes in, like Heiner's talking about, and people are going to have to watch it 3 or 4 times. Although, Barry, you did say you had a skill of making it so lay people can understand it. So
that's the goal. Important. I don't know if it's a skill, but it's a goal.
Yeah. Well, you said you attempt it, so that's something that's important.
And that's why the Socratic method is so powerful, because the pace is governed by the interlocutor, the person who's asking and answering the questions. They set the pace. So I will proceed, you know, with the Socratic dialogue at whatever pace the other person is setting and at whatever depth they're setting. It's hard to use that in a group because the group doesn't all sort of learn in sync. The problem is that you might have one person who's really engaged in perfect sync, and the others are either running ahead or running slow. And the bigger the group, like if you have 20 people in the class, then half of them are out of sync.
Well, if you think about that node map you had with the points or the different points of importance, I guess. If when you, each one of those may start off a new Socratic inquiry, if that method is used, and that would be like a branch or sub map of that point, or, you know, show your work basically. And I think the Socratic method can be handed back between people who are a teacher and student. Then the teacher's probably going to be the one in control of the questioning, or the lecturer, as you said in your case with the presentation. But I think at some levels, there has to be a balance to turn it into a conversation, so that, you know, the whole conversation doesn't become, you know, so almost like a bell goes off at 10 minutes of your allowed 10 minutes to inquire in with that line of reasoning, and then the roles flip. And it might even flip to a new place on the map where the other person was actually, because a conversation can be like Sam's example of barn raising last week, different in different areas. And we had a bit of a misunderstanding of whether I thought we didn't have focus. And I was saying we had focus, but we were focusing on many different things. So are you still following me, Barry?
I just noticed that Kayla disconnected.
Yeah,
and Sam also is off to take a shower. So I was distracted by the fact that 2 people wanted to leave and didn't have a chance to say that I want to leave.
I think Sam left quite a while ago.
He just put something in the chat.
I think he's just giving us a heads up. I'm surprised he didn't start a new recording for the after show. Maybe.
1 minute ago, 2:01 p.m.
Yeah.
My time, he says, I'm off to take a shower. We'll be done. Will you guys be done by 12 his time, which is 3 o'clock our time, and that's 1 more hour? Or does one of you?
I hope so.
Have another Zoom account?
Yeah.
The main thing is we do not want to go over 4 hours, because then you don't get the closed caption transcript on his account.
Yeah.
It has to be under 4 hours.
Well, I think I've said quite a bit, and I'm trying to lean into Sam and Heiner and Doug. Some of the things you do, Barry. I liked Harry's art, his iconography. So there's a lot of things that I've aligned with as far as some ideas, and the idea is how do I make that part of what I want without taking over the conversation? And I see that happening in back channels and side channels, and announcing and trying to get interest in the main channel and telling about what success is and how it's gone. But yeah, I think this long form conversation is necessary. But one thing I didn't want to say before is, like, there was a real success out of the GCC program. Gertrude's Thursday show, or Friday show, about the appreciators. And this would be the last topic that I want to raise, but probably not cover it today. But Josh hit on it again. Who's the organization? And then I saw a chat that said the GCC has some resources. What are those? And Doug gave a good response to that. But as soon as I read that, I was thinking about the $400 in the bank account, right? And we never did resolve, what that $400, and does that establish a GCC group? And is it owned by Aaron Perlmutter or Perlmutter? Perlmutter, yeah. And and what is the GCC group? I think you're on that trail too, trying to figure out, and you've questioned the focus and the wide ranginess of it. So I think spreading it out over 4 shows helps break up the swim lanes, but I still find it a little bit fuzzy. And Doug has taken it to an emergence into unblocking, and has changed some of the premises that he started with. And I think that's one of the things we can highlight, like what were some of the early premises when we started coming here. Heiner's spoken about he's here. Heiner started with sharing accounts from Fleming with Tammy, and he's mentioned Tammy again. So I don't know if you know that aspect of the GCC and how important Tammy is to Heiner and that initiative.
I've never been in any session where she was present, and I haven't seen any old videos yet.
Well, she can scream more than you can, and she's a sweetheart too. So,
she can do what more? I missed your word.
I'm still thinking back to that time when you go, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. That was.
No, you see, Bibi has done a playlist with all our experiments. They've been putting me on a hot seat and whatever. It was
nice.
Quite a treat. And the real guy behind is Fleming Funch, and he is still around doing the New Civilization Network. And with him, we did the Wholeness summer school seminar based on what we did with the Santa Fe School of Consciousness, on bringing every aspect of wholeness or cosmos together. What were the roots? Which schools have been working on that? So actually, I think we should get Tammy back. I wonder if she is not ill. I'm really concerned. And also, we should get Fleming Funch and Anthony Judge back into the seat, because I'm so happy that you're here, Barry. But as our time is coming to an end, and so the recording somehow has some problems, I propose we do it in separate sections, or we have sections for rehearsal and for harvesting. Anyway, I have to be now. It's 8 o'clock here. I have to be somewhere else already. I really enjoyed our session, and I share the playlist with you, Barry, so you can see her smile.
Yeah. Okay. If you save the chat, Colin, I put in what I could quickly find are 2 podcast links. There may be, and I think the one that's called A Neighbor's Choice, I think there's a whole video about, he's a guy on the radio. I think he's got a video up on YouTube with the same thing, but all it'll have is his picture. So didn't really, although maybe there might be a closed caption transcript on that version.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think as well, I'm going to have to sign off. We can pick up some of these conversations in another thread if we so deem. Probably a Facebook thread would be best where other people could join in.
Yeah, I like it to be public, as you know, and not so much in Messenger, because that's really a small group. I'd rather have it be like on a timeline or in a GCC.
Yeah, you've mentioned that before, and but open it up, and you know, and as well what Heiner just said. I don't want to dismiss what he just said about trying to pull in some of the originators back into the group.
It's fine with me.
And I think an overall value of resource that we could have is a Venn diagram of what is the GCC, because it's many things. It's more than one thing to some people, and it looks probably end up looking like that diagram that Josh had in his background. But I think part of the secret of the GCC is not being rule-based and having a safe space where people can express whatever idea they want. I just hope that people keep a focus, and if they're making exaggerated claims, then might have to challenge them. But I hope I'm doing better than in the past, because I'm very skeptical. So anyway.
I'll give you one more quote. This is from some interpretation of the New Testament, where a centurion is challenging Jesus. And Jesus says to the centurion, "If my words are false, why do you heed them? If my words are true, why do you strike me?"
Yeah. I think it's called nuance. And I think the Israeli-Palestine conflict can be an example of that, and many others. Who's better, right? Who's better are we talking about? And I'm not an expert in the Israeli-Palestine conflict, but I know it has been a, how would you say, a cornerstone in trying to have peace agreements for, you know, what would you call them, government officials who are tasked with the peace mission role, which would be, you know, different.
The diplomats.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. And yeah, and that diplomacy, I think, is key.
Diploma means that they have a high level of education, which I think you're not real fond of, diplomas and
no, not at all. I'm not fond of people.
Professors.
No, I have no problem with professors. I think I have a problem with messaging and communication, like a time and place.
To profess.
Yeah. So I don't know how to explain that, but I don't know where you would get the impression that I wasn't in favor of academics. I'm not in favor of dogma.
Well, that's the one kind of professing.
I think it comes down again to the claim.
Schools of thought. A school of thought can be considered dogmatic. It's got nothing to do with theology. Just be a dogmatic school of thought, like in economic theory, for example.
Yeah.
And people profess their theory, which is their dogma.
And actually, economics is a really good one, because it's a example, because it's a wicked problem and it's an experiment. Really, some people don't even realize that it's an experiment. They think it'll always work.
That's why they link back to previous examples, linking back religio. They link back to previous examples and say, did that economic theory pan out in this or that country, you know, a century or so, or half a century ago?
Yeah. So and there's a difference in those things that are wicked problems as opposed to what we were just mentioning, which is more concrete. I can't remember exactly what we're talking about. You lost the train. I was going to say something, but that's all right. It comes down to the message about what Heiner was bringing up about respecting the time of the space. He talked to me about, and he can say some more now if he wants to, about what he's expecting, but about having a way in a spreadsheet to manage the people's time. So you could gift somebody your time. So if you were talking about something really interesting and I have 10 minutes out of the slice of pie.
You know how they used to give
I can,
on vaudeville?
yeah, well, no, you don't take anybody's time. You gift time to somebody else that you find interesting. So everybody has the same amount of time coming in. Unless, for example, this is good because this kind of helps give the model for the different kinds of meetings. A fishbowl model would be where you take half the meeting and give it to one person or 2 or 3 people presenting, where the rest of the people are an audience and giving time for questioning afterwards, right? So it's about how do you allot up the time and the focus of, so that's what they were calling the fishbowl. There was a meeting one time, they had a fishbowl meeting here at the GCC. The history is that Tammy, Sam, and Doug got together to decide what to do with the videos, like the ownership of the videos, who owned them. And it also had to do with making rules around violent triggers. There was I think there was an episode around people being unhappy and wanting the group to make some rules about what is considered violent. And Sam refers to that as well in the barn raisings. If somebody was actually ejected from the GCC by one of the members who's no longer here. And I was involved in that fiasco. And it was somebody well-meaning. And actually they're a big member of the meta group. So you know who this is.
Is he from Monterrey, New Mexico?
Yes, he's from Mexico, I think.
ET. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Extraterrestrial ET. Yeah.
Yeah. No. And you know, Sam really was wanting to go back and unpack that and see what happened as far as, you know, and it's on the map. I said that same day, which was years ago now, a couple of years, I put a marker on the map as a milestone to say, let's come back to this. So you can. What?
I actually have up on one of my websites the transcript of a transaction with that same person, which he read and responded to. And it's up on my website. I don't advertise it, but it's there.
Yeah.
The aftermath is there.
And, you know, a lot of his base ideas, again, I was really agreeing with. But when it came down to personal interaction and dogma, it kind of fell off the rails, if you know what I mean.
Taboo or not taboo? That is the question.
Well, it wasn't so much taboo. It was too much intensity of energy put into smaller points of philosophy, I think. And it's like not really sticking to the point. So the person was really looking for engagement, I think, more than anything. But again, you know, what's your goal? And I think that's something that can protect us here, to keep us away from wasting too much time by sticking to our intent and making it known, as opposed to entertaining people who are eventually, you know, how do you disengage from that person was the question. And the answer was the boot, right? That's how, and I was actually talking to the person saying, please, you know, less comments on this. And I was trying to explain some variable thing. And then he got into this 4-dimensional theory of some sort that had nothing to do with what I was talking about. And now I'm trying to back out of the conversation, and I can't do it because it just keeps coming like flooding. And so how do you tell this person, share less with me, right? That was a big problem for me. And another moderator just got, I was an admin at that time. And, but I just left it be, and another person had enough, and they just took it upon themselves to eject this person. And people had mixed mixed feelings about whether that was the right thing to do. So we never did revisit that. But I think overall people think, yes, it was the right thing to do. That's the feeling that I'm getting.
Colin, is this session available?
Actually, there was a private session done with that person. Sam has it. The person, are you talking about the person who got ejected from the group?
I don't know about this discussion on what you just mentioned. If he was ejected, I don't know.
Yes, he was.
ETMS, was it from Monterey?
New Mexico. Mexico.
Yes.
From Monterey, New Mexico.
Yes. Was it Alexander Laszlo?
No.
Spanish speaking.
No. The initials were ET, since Barry's already said it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, then it's another thing because we have many such things going on. I really enjoy, and if you can get this integration of poetry and baby making pictures or taking pictures out of her story. We were talking about Marvel heroes and other things. If you could get that together from your images mind map or however I should call it, would be nice. I'm just collecting some of these visualizers presenting me, and I have it now at the front page of my LinkedIn and Facebook. So anyway, I would like to follow up with you on that and discuss the groups of the overview schools now and the orbit schools. So you see, there's a lot of sectarianism going on, and we should really discuss it. And I'm very happy that Barry is here so he can provide us with some roots. Anyway, see you guys soon. And we make 3 sessions, a backstage and a front stage and a rehearsal or side stage. Over and out. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I don't know if I lost. There it is. Yeah, with Heiner, yeah, that's so some good models about some meetings that we could have where we could experiment with keeping time and and gifting time. It doesn't have to be something we do. I actually played around with another guy who wrote a program which would allow people to log into a website, and then it would start to allow people to almost do symbology on the back end channel of the conversation. So you could raise your hand like Zoom does. It says who's the next speaker, and you could keeps track of the time. So anyway, well, Barry, I think we've reached the end of the meeting. I believe.
Awesome. Barry is gone.
I think Barry's gone.
Maybe he's.
He fell asleep.
No, he has to do. Maybe he has too much water. He needs to throw away some water.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't plan on sticking around so long this time, but it is very interesting, the idea of formats where you could focus on different messages. That reminds me, Tees, did you not say that sometime coming up this spring you're going to have an announcement?
Yeah, but it's not an announcement. It's just me presenting, maybe. So that's
okay.
All. It just means that I had something on hold, so I didn't want to have a word out on something that I influenced. So and now, more or less promised to myself not to mention certain developments but it's still not clear if they are going to happen.
Right.
It's also because of COVID that things that I proposed that
give me a heads up
cannot be done.
Yeah, give me a heads up if things move.
Well, it's moving a bit because I'm getting closer to what It was in my mind, not what is going to happen, but in the relation sphere. So the humans that are involved are getting closer. I was not communicating until now January. So now I'm seeing, okay, I've put some ideas somewhere and now I'm communicating more. So I get positive feedback already. So it's not, so if I have an idea, which I did, then it is for the others to find out if it's feasible, if it fits. So that's still to be seen. So then in May, it will be clearer if the idea that I put somewhere is feasible. So in May, I think I can see if there's use has been made of it, yes or no, and then it's easier for me to talk.
Well, that's good. It's still a possibility.
And there are different lines that I can use. So I'm still thinking on what I could present, but I'm not so prolific as Buddy, so I just have something, say, more than 20 years ago that might be interesting. But
well,
but that's also that I didn't want to share earlier. So it's about time to share things that I have made and that it's still important probably. But it's too, how to call it, it's void of, I would say, anima. It's the, it has the logos, but not the, you have logos. I put it in the, I put it to Barry actually, or in the greater chat.
Okay, that sounds good.
Ethos, pathos, logos. So what I have is purely logos, and the ethos and the pathos is not there. So I need, so if I present something which is only logos, which means empty words, then it's not interesting. But if I can show it as a living idea that's functioning, it's usable, practical, then it's different. Then it needs to be, that is pathos. So it means it's in the heart. So it can show the how it functions, how it's alive, and then the ethos is how is possible, how it's helping others to go further. So it's, for me, it's the pathos, but then ethos would mean if it's valuable for the society. There are some words inside a document that I have that is on the ethos part, but it's very limited. So it's too descriptive. So and if it's descriptive, I call it only logos. Means it,
yeah.
And otherwise, if it's descriptive, well, it's the map. And if it's like, if the Aboriginals, they are part of the land. If you take them from the land, they lose their identity. So the identity is well, for the people who live directly from the land. So the eggs and so on, everything that can be found in the surrounding and how they live, say Stone Age, then really, you're part of that surroundings, because the surroundings are delivering you the food and you're delivering back by tending to that area and peeing and pooping in that area. So you bring the fertilizers back into the area. So you're influencing as part of a landscape. So then it's so that is more so the document that I have is not like that. So if I have to put it into the framework of, okay, it's framed like that, and that it did have a meaning to me, but it had a meaning differently. So it's so many aspects of it. So it's difficult to present, actually.
It definitely seems to be holistic and definitely environmental.
I don't know. I don't like the word holistic and so on.
Well, holistic in the sense that maybe end to end might be better.
Because it's engineering basic, so it's
end to end might be better. Beginning to end. End to end
well,
design.
what I have made is sort of that's what I. So this is actually presentation. This is what I'm speaking now. Who's putting things in the chat? Or save chat? Who's going to save the chat? Who's going to save the chat?
Ethos, Pathos, Logos.
Yeah.
See also the Bardiac Arts.
Yeah. That's always he's listening. Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
So he's putting.
Sam takes a copy.
He takes a saving. Okay.
Yeah. Sam will get a copy of the chat from having been the host.
Yeah.
And
if I keep on,
he'll put that into a Word doc.
Yeah.
If you want it today, get it today. So.
Okay. If I keep talking with you, I can have some presentation prepared more or less, but it depends on you. But you don't have time anymore, I think.
Yeah, no, I've got to get going, but definitely.
So
I've listened to some of your stuff before, and I'm glad you're talking with Barry about it as well.
No, Barry also once, I think I got annoyed from me chatting with him in Messenger. So he made a copy of a chat. Maybe I can use that for talking. So
okay.
That could be part of it. Someone even found it, I know.
let's hope that it's a positive iteration.
Well, it might not be positive, but it's okay.
No, I mean the iterations of work.
It's bearing witness of
bearing witness, yes. Well,
of a chat, and then it can be, of course, used
I guess the iterations of conversation, like Barry mentioned it today, if it goes out of control, it becomes, from his historical standpoint, hell is a form of something recursive that's out of control. So if we can get the conversations under control and get them focused on, what it is you need, want, and you're asking, and then, other people that can align with those things can help.
I appreciate, because it's a real life exchange, and it might not be as you speak, focused on anything to be achieved. Only what was interesting for me to Barry was, and what is happening now that he's in GCC in the meetings. Yes. And then it's also his intention, because I wanted to have him join to a group made by Michael Yosefovich. I saw it's a closed group, so he wants complete exposure of anything. He needs all his work to be exposed globally, because it has a value. And already when I was chatting with him, I was positive about things that more and more people should be able to access this. So they have to it has to be notified. That's it. And that's what he's doing, like now in the chat also. So
and if it's and to prepare it so that people can understand it and digest it.
That's different. So now if he wants to have a presentation, then, but first actually I've listened to one of these talks now. He needs to have a direct feedback on what's on his website that triggers you. So that's say, hey, this is interesting because, and I read it because I felt like that, and now I see this, and now I can act like this. So he needs to know like that, then he can use it for presenting. He wants to have the feedback on the value of what he has published. People can say, oh, that's so nice. So it's like what John Calden puts in. So don't put all the likes in, just say why it's valuable to you. So and Colin is, and I listen to it. Colin is thrown out with John and so on.
Yeah, actually, I think he changed his opinion on the likes, but I don't know. It's back and forth.
No, he does some likes. Even if I put in some, I got a like from him. So, but of course, he was, of course, well, people, about clickbaits and so on. He doesn't like that. So I want to have people to go consider it and consider about reactions. And Barry did. Then it went into the heart, and then John Callan might be too superficial, more or less. Even I got
well, I
caught.
think John Keldon is focused on something and stuff
He's
that
now
is
caught even in the American politics. So he's
no.
applauding Joe Biden and so on. So it's really he's got
I don't know.
caught. Even he put in some anti-Trump and then he removed it. So he was somehow something happened that he was surprised to himself. He got too much reactions on something on Trump that he thought, okay, this is not my side. Do it elsewhere. So he had to throw something
Get his fingers
away.
burned. Get his fingers burned.
He got burned more or less on this politics. And now he's so positive about Joe Biden and so on. So actually he's he forgot.
Well, nobody's an
something.
expert in everything, that's for sure. I think
forgot-
it
he
is
forgot
interesting though that the
he forgot to
experiment he's trying
focus.
to do. He's doing an experiment in collective intelligence.
I would call it, well, what he says, I'm busy with pattern language. So he uses words like understanding or any topics that he uses. And he doesn't make a map like now Joshua showed from Gödel Escherbach. So, but actually he might need such a, so if Joshua can share it to me, then I can share that page to John Calden, and Joe Calden will be surprised that is maybe also what he is doing. So this what's happening here is still relevant for those that are not here, and I know where to, and then I know where to put it and what time.
Well, the Venn diagram I was talking about hopefully can help bring
which Venn diagram.
It isn't built yet, but I've been talking about building a Venn diagram based on what people will agree, parts of what the GCC or this kind of a online initiative means.
But did you see the Beatles Venn diagram of Barry Cort? It was shared not by Barry, but someone else.
No, you'll have to send me a link. But
No,
yeah, I think yeah, please do. But I think that so we're getting close to the end. But finding better ways to be clear and focusing is what it comes down to, and ways to get feedback, like you said, from other people. Stacy gave Barry some feedback on one of his things. I think various people have enjoyed some of his work on different things. Some like the parodies, some like the education stuff, like Kayla. And I think the takeaway from Barry for me is that he's ready to talk about his stuff, but he's mentioned that he has some difficulties in following things that aren't written down, and also he needs things presented in a way that doesn't distract him with trying to, I think he goes a little bit too much in the etymology of things, which Sam brought up today, which is interesting, but it can stop a conversation. So there's a balance to be had that doesn't work with me. But I propose today that if we could do more of a back and forth, then maybe something could happen in public. But it would be easy. It would be easy to do it in piecemeal and to set up the premise of why you're doing it.
Back and forth, it means actually that Barry can do something and one person is going to react. Then you got a moderator. It's like Dave and Nora, what I saw. You have two persons.
Yes.
You and Barry. Barry is presenting. You're talking. Two are talking. Say three moderators. Heine said 3 moderators. I saw 2. He saw 3. So one person preparing. 2 persons talking with each other, knowing questions to ask. Then even these 2 talking things, and then the moderator says, "Oh, Oh, I might not summarize. Oh, I might not. You forbid me to summarize. I saw the moderator being surprised, not being able to steer the discussion because he wanted to summarize and highlight certain things that were said, and then these two were saying, no, no, that should not be done because that's the reason. So it's very funny. And but if people like Barry needed me to declare who I am, then okay, I'm embedded in a culture. So if I need to know, I am a person, and I know I'm just embedded. I'm just part of a group. So
Well, it would be nice to
it's difficult to
categorize it.
say what I am. I am, but that's all.
Well, it would be nice to categorize the different people that come to share for different reasons, because
yeah, I can categorize myself, but then
well, not so much you individually, not the characteristics of you, but kind of like the area of sharing that you want to take part in, of a list of, you know, the things that are being done here, which are the ones that you are interested in.
That's happening haphazardly. I'm listening, seeing what's relevant. Other people get something from me. Might not be relevant. I think it's relevant. Get feedback. Have to contextualize why I share it. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes I'm not good in contextualizing. I know it's part of a discussion. So I learn to contextualize. So that's good. It's learning for me. So it's so nice. But then...
Well, it's just an obvious thing coming to a group where there's so many different kinds of people, and you know, even Glenn and Sam today, you notice that, you know, they've been talking together for years, but they're still a little bit confused on what the other means when it comes to the word science. And is it worth having an investigation into what Glenn is feeling into? Is he using the right words? I understand Sam, and from what Glenn is saying, something about a pure science or real science. And I think in that sense, what he means is something that in investigating hypothesis based on interest and not based on private company needs alone. So a real academic world of science that is funded, like the space program. I don't know. I think that's what he's getting at. If anybody's ever really tried, and you know, I think that's what it might have looked back in the days of the churches when they started, you know, out of philosophy and investigating the world and planetary motions and things. And I think it's Galileo comes into somebody and says, "Here, we're not. The sun's not traveling around the Earth. The Earth is traveling around the sun."
First Copernicus, and then even then. So it's.
Yeah, Copernicus came up with it, but Galileo was the one, I believe, that the Catholic Church put him, you know, put him under house arrest because, you know, he was coming up with these things that didn't involve God necessarily. And interesting, 500 years later, the Catholic Church apologized for that. But, you know, it comes down to that kind of a thing. Introducing ideas in a dogmatic world where people aren't open and the channels aren't open. And you know, understanding where somebody else is coming from and listening to where they are coming from before you propose a solution, right? And that's exactly what you were saying. You have an idea. Right now, it's a logos full of empty words. But if it gets implemented and people can use it, then it's time for you to start turning on the more information about it. That's the way.
No, it's the value that others can. I have to show what the value is for me. So to give it, okay, it's a living object. So why it's alive? I mean, it's empty words, but okay, why do I like to present it? So what is the basics for presenting it? And then if I present it, it must be heartfelt. I mean, so if it's just And if it's not heartfelt, it has not a pathos. And then if it has the pathos, it also has to need to have the ethos. So if it's a document that enhances global warming, if applied, so then it's not. You see, so it's that's the ethos. Pathos is you can be inflamed by fire, so that the inner fire can burn. And it's so nice, it's so good, we should do that. And then, but the ethos might be wrong because eventually it might be improving the global warming. So that's what I mean with ethos, pathos. So if you do something,
I must say overall, I'm happy to hear that we're going to be trying these more focusing sessions, and it's nice to see Heiner engaged and involved as well.
Any topic. So if one person has a topic or a vague anything, but if it's prepared, then if it's prepared, then it's nice.
Yeah. I think that is
something. Can be anything.
Have you seen any of the videos I've been doing lately?
No, nothing, because I saw what Baricot shared in the chat. So if it's in the chat, in the bound racing chat, I might run into it. And otherwise,
I'll just because we talked about it, I'll send you some of the demo stuff I'm working on.
I saw one thing, I've seen one thing maybe, but I don't know why I got it and how I got it. But
well, it's in a playlist. The videos themselves are unlisted, but once they get good, then they can be put into public circulation.
Well, now it depends on the feedback that you want. So if you want to share, then tell what kind of feedback you want.
Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy week. A lot of things have happened with the election and Michael Josefits.
Do you know Bernie de Koven? Ever heard about Bernie de Koven?
Bernie de Koven? No.
No, you didn't. Okay.
I grew up with him. He was in my synagogue. His father was the rabbi who headed up the Jewish education program, and his father and mother were the ones who signed my report cards for Talmud.
I have a story with Bernie de Koven. It was someone in the Philippines. I was talking about games. I said, these are always for win and lose and so on. And I've noticed in the timeline of this Filipino man already Bernie, but I thought I didn't look like a nice guy, so I was not interested. Then he said, you should connect with Bernie. So, I thought, nice subject. We don't like games for win and lose. I try Bernie. So I told him, I don't like games for win and lose, Bernie de Koven. Actually, first Facebook friendship. We opened blindly, both. We dare to trust. So he opened LinkedIn and Gmail, Google. So we made all the connections. Then eventually, suddenly he sent me an unpublished book, which is now a playful path. So and then he put a question. So if it was worthwhile to publish, so I was the first one to read it. So and then I didn't have any. I'm Dutch, so we are not have any feelings of celebrity status. So so later I thought, it might be a celebrity, but I got that book before I realized he might be famous or something. So, and he had questions, so if it's worthwhile to publish. So I said, but specify your questions. So he made 2 separate questions out of it. And then I took 1 week to glance over it. In 1 week, top down and then back. So first 2 days and 2 days from front to end, and then 3 days from back to front. Then I said, it has value for something. So it means it's a little bit uplifting, and other things I say, it's not really a book that you can learn something from. So maybe that's what I said. And then I started to read the whole thing, and I'm not native in English, but I got many typos, maybe 10 typos, but I got all the typos out. So in that year, in the end, he needed me to speed up, and then he got it published eventually. So it was a funny thing to do. And then when I first got connects with Michael Josevich, I sent the farewell letter of Bernie soon after I connected with Michael. I said, show, look at this guy, what he wrote in the end. I said, oh, that's nice. So I just read it again, but I don't want to put it in the timeline of Michael Josevich now. But it could have been written by Michael Josevich, of course, because he felt, maybe I send it to maybe I have to put it somewhere, maybe that people can see it again. It's a nice letter, how Bernie said, I have many loved ones that I need to connect with now, are leaving Facebook, anything. So that's sorry guys. I have still much love to get and to give. So and then of course he died. I didn't know when he died, but I missed him. I miss him, of course, just like I miss Michael Josevich now. I kept on chatting with Bernie. I mean, after having done that book, which was actually on my bucket list, to have an unpublished book and to look into it. He even put some part of it in the end of the book, because this is not nice to read. I mean, I don't feel. He wanted to know why doesn't, what is it that doesn't make you, doesn't give you a feeling of uplifting. But it was I couldn't find the words to find out why wasn't good enough. Then he made it appendix of it. So if you see the book, it has an appendix. It's because of my reaction to that part of the book. It did not resonate with me. That's it. Then he also, because he's an American, he put in some baseball idea. The Junior League. I told him Junior League, that doesn't function in Europe. It doesn't sound anything. So he changed a bit of it. And then, so now if you read it, and the Europeans would look into it. What is the Junior League? What is it? But it was very funny to be so close to Bernie. But he reacted the same as Michael Josevich actually does. Maybe it's Jewish, I don't know, because I'm not Jewish. So maybe it's the idea of being connected to someone from, but okay, well, Michael said, okay, I'm not like that. But I mean, he's not religious. But I'm an outsider. I mean, maybe it's, I don't, so actually, when I was reading the book A Playful Part, I fell into Jewishness. I mean, the many stories are about things happening. I think we have it in the Dutch culture a little bit. So if I go and travel, I take with me, and then you have to memorize. But I think some game like memorization is in the playful part too. So, but that was funny. The Bernie the Coven is of course a separate story. A playful part, yes, that's Coburg. But there is another part which is the farewell letter of, you can find it, the farewell letter of Bernie. Brian Alexander, you might not know, but Brian Alexander I picked up because of Bernie, and then I found out he was also playing Agent Evoke, but he left before the end. But so I'm connected with Brian Alexander too, a bit. That's and no, that's enough for today. So I'll mute myself now.
Let Sam end this because it's 9 minutes to the top of the hour. If it goes over 4 hours, he doesn't get the closed caption transcript, so it has to end within.
Yeah. I just
so
like to make a
I
final
say goodbye. I say goodbye until.
Hold on for 1 sec. Hold on for 1 sec.
Yes.
Do you two find it
quite amazing that you would both be so closely interacting with somebody, the same person, this Bernard?
Bernie DeKoven, I mean, he grew up, he was a cohort of mine in Omaha, and I knew his parents. His parents were my teachers.
Yeah, and now surprising that he would ask, do you know who that is? And you speak up, say, yes, I know who that is.
Because I have it listening, I'm doing some other work, but I got.
But that's quite a coincidence. I think that's a large coincidence.
No, I think it's very no. Oh yeah, it's a coincidence. But for me, this is blind knowledge. I mean, it doesn't matter.
It's not a coincidence, and here's the reason why. The same synagogue where Bernie DeKoven was in attendance and his parents were the head of the education section and one of my teachers, the main rabbi, Rabbi Kripke, was an extremely influential teacher. I learned the Socratic method from him, and his son, Rabbi Kripke's son, Saul Kripke, is a famous American philosopher logician.
Yes, yeah, I think you told me that before.
And I learned to think from them. They were the ones who, without them, I wouldn't have ever learned how to think.
And this is Bernard Louis DeKoven.
The father of Bernie was one of the
Rabbi DeKoven.
Rabbi DeKoven. Okay, yeah. And he was a teacher of
He was the head of. Say every synagogue has a Talmud Torah, an education, Sunday school. And Rabbi DeKoven was the head of the Sunday school, and his wife was the teacher of the class I was in. Here's Sam. He wants to shut down before the 4 hours screws him up.
Yes, the censor has arrived. I'm going to deny you your freedom of speech.
Yes.
We call it kindred spirits, and I think we better all go.
Yeah, the merciful.
If one of you guys has a Zoom account, you guys can actually continue there.
No, that's enough.
But I don't want to use it.
Yeah, that's enough.
I want to use it.
I'm tapping out.
Okay.
Great.
10.
Bye. Thank you.
9,
Thank you for
8,
having the space.
7.
Giving the space.
6.
Okay.
5.
Bye.
4.
Bye. Bye.
3.